Hey everyone, I'm Travis Wright, and you're listening to I'm a Fan of, your show for music, comedy, and more. As always, if you're a musician, a comedian, or just someone that does something interesting, please reach out to me on Instagram at I'm a Fan of Pod. You can find me on Facebook at I'm a Fan of, or you can reach out to me through the website at imafanofpod.com. Of course, if you just enjoy the show, please follow me there as well and like and subscribe to the podcast. Before we get into this episode, thank you to everyone who has watched TRENA by Lawrence Rosales, the debut comedy special from both Lawrence and from myself, and I'm a fan of. It's the first one we've ever done, and as of this recording, it's about to hit 13,000 streams. That's in just over a week, so thank you all for watching. Thank you all for sharing. Please continue to do so. Moving on to today's guest. You might remember we had half of the Deadgood comedy production company. Mr. Kevin Deanda was on here previously. Now we've got his other half, Scott Bedgood. That's right. He is the second half of Deadgood Productions, as well as a very funny, starting stand-up comic right now. I had the pleasure of watching him a few times. Most recently was at the Tyler, Texas, at the Rose City Comedy Club, which is his hometown. We get into that on the podcast. Beautiful comedy club. Please make the trip out to Tyler, Texas. Go watch a comedy show. But yeah, Scott is a really funny kind of up-and-coming comic. He's starting this production company, and I really just enjoyed chatting with him. So let's stop wasting time. Let's just get into the interview. This is Scott Bedgood. The I'm a Fan of podcast. Music, comedy, and more. Scott Bedgood. What's up, dude?
What's up, man?
Excited to have you in here because we're fresh off your Rose City Comedy Club show.
Yeah.
Which was, I'm really excited to talk to you about this, about Tyler in general and that club, because it, lit a fire in my belly going to that town to watch a comedy show.
Yeah.
And also, how cool is it that you not only sold out your show, but you sold it out to the point where people wanted tickets and couldn't get them?
Yeah,
You could have done 2 nights.
I honestly, I really could. It was weird because, my friends from high school and stuff were messaging me and being like, dude, I tried to get tickets and what happened? And I had to be like, bro, it's sold out.
That's how it is, man. It's big time.
That means they can't fit more people in the building. You know? And I felt bad about that, but I was like, I guess I'll have to come back.
But that's hometown for you, right?
Yeah.
That's where you grew up.
That's where I grew up, yeah.
So was that the first time you'd performed comedy there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So obviously growing up there was nothing. So I left in when I graduated high school in 2009. So obviously I go back to see my parents and stuff like that, but haven't lived there since then. And growing up, and I opened with that joke of hey, if I wanted to laugh at something on a Friday night, we'd go to Walmart and people watch. Yeah. And that wasn't a joke. That is what we did. Yeah. And you're from a much smaller town.
Yeah.
But you can relate to the boredom of, and Tyler has 100,000 people now. Wow. Had about 85,000 people when I was there. Mm-hmm. But it's not like this as much anymore, but it was very much like a very large small town. Yeah,
well, and it's just my ignorance of that area. I'm so ignorant of just East Texas in general.
Okay, well,
I know the towns. I've seen them. I've driven past them, and I see them on the weather reports whenever y'all just get decimated with tornadoes and stuff, right?
That does happen.
But there's just an ignorance. It's I knew Tyler was over there, and I knew it's a city. This is not some little podunk town. But when I was driving out there, I was still thinking small town. And then immediately as we're getting into the area where the club is, it's you're seeing taller buildings, you're seeing more established places, and you're like, man, I just had a totally skewed view of this city just out of purely never going there,
Right.
And just pleasantly surprised with you're right. It's it is a city, but it feels little, not in a negative way. It feels like you're still going to wave at people when you're driving around.
Oh, absolutely.
That kind of little.
And you know everybody. And when I go there, if I go to a restaurant, I'm still going to see my parents' friends or friends from high school. Mm-hmm. You see everybody everywhere. But there's 100,000 people there, and it's growing rapidly. They're building a UT Tyler Medical School that's supposed to bring tens of thousands of people. So it is growing rapidly, but it has that feel of small town. And I think it's really because all of the towns around it are really small, and all of those people come into Tyler pretty much every day.
Yeah. It made me, by the time this is released, I'll have already released an article that I wrote about it, about the comedy club, about Rose City Comedy Club.
That article was great.
Yeah, thank you. But it just makes sense that there should be a comedy club there, and to their credit and to y'all's credit, Christopher's the guy who runs it all, right?
Right, yeah.
He's owner-operator, I guess?
Yeah, Christopher, and then Jason McAdam.
Yeah, he was the opening comic and the host, right?
Right, and he does a lot. He does the booking. He does a lot from like the comedian side, but the two of them kind of keep it going, and they do a really good job.
Well, I mean, and it was, I told my buddy Chris who came with me, I was like, hey man, I'm driving out to Tyler. I don't know if this is going to be a shitty little club and a horrible experience. I was like, but I got to check this club out because I kept seeing such a well-presented club on social media.
Right.
He's done such a good job of all the performers are either getting clips or at least still pictures with his stage and Rose City backlit behind them. And he's got the sense enough to put like their names and their social media handles. And he's doing it right, So on the way there, I was thinking, I don't really know what to expect. And then when I got there, I realized I was like, oh, it's humble, but it's not shitty. It's a club.
Yeah.
It's a legit, like the room itself felt right for comedy.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like, oh, they're trying to do a comedy show in this place.
Right.
It was like, oh, yeah. There's like he's made it out of pallets, and it looks like most of the stuff was bought off Amazon, but it's all set up the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I was describing it as like they punch way above their weight.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
For what they should be in the town they're in, they should not have the influence that they've started to have. They should not be getting the talent that they're starting to have. And just like, I'm not going to reveal numbers or anything, but it's not like they're just out here paying people way more than anybody else.
No.
They're really good about paying you before you left, which is nice.
What's the max seating? It's under 50.
It was 50.
Right at 50.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, yeah, it's like 50 at a $10 ticket. We can all do math. You know, it's like it's not bringing in.
And they don't sell liquor. They don't have a liquor license.
Yeah, they don't bring in the thousands and thousands of dollars that these other clubs do.
No.
But it's also, low overhead because you're not having to deal with a crazy expensive lease or anything. So
yeah, the building that it was in, and you can look at the building right next to it. They're like storage. And one of the things we talked about is like Tyler as a downtown was not a thing. It was mostly abandoned buildings and the courthouse, and then this one place called Rick's.
So the clubs, like I said, I'm still so ignorant, and I was just there for that. So is it in downtown?
It's like right outside. So if you turned...
could I have walked to downtown?
Yeah.
To the square or whatever it is?
It would be a quarter mile to the square.
Okay.
Just like around the corner, basically.
Yeah.
And you didn't go there, right? Except for if you were going to court or Rick's, which this one place, this guy Rick...
That's the music venue you were telling me about, right? The blues guy?
Yeah, it's like he's a blues... it's a restaurant and a blues... centric music, but then he's branched out to other things. But he basically was like, I'm going downtown. We're going to make it a music thing, and he did that 30 years ago, and nobody else followed him, and he just stuck with it, and it was popular because it was the only thing. But now there's a True Vine Brewing. There's I think there's an Andy's Frozen Custard there, which is amazing. There's like a really nice steakhouse called Prime 102, like real like $150 steak, kind of like top notch kind of place. And Don Juan was like the only other place. There's a Mexican restaurant that's pretty popular, but that's it. Now there's like a lot of things that you go downtown for. And so Rose City being just outside of there is part of that renaissance. And then there's actually another ETX brewing just down the street on the way to down. So there's like all this stuff that wasn't there at all. And obviously, so Smith County was also a dry county up until like 2011.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So growing up, you couldn't even, like restaurants could sell alcohol, but there were no liquor stores. You couldn't buy it.
You did the whole private club thing.
Yeah, there was that.
I grew up in that was my town.
Yeah. And so people would drive, right outside the county line, and there were all the liquor stores and stuff. But like the culture, and obviously the culture of breweries and stuff is newer, even just in Texas, but it was even slower to Tyler. But then people have really embraced it because it's like, wow, there's actually things we can do. We can hang out, and younger people can go somewhere and just hang out, right? And that's all like really new in Tyler, and it's cool. But like it was really weird going there. And I mean, most of those people that were at that club probably didn't know a club existed there until...
You talking about the night that I watched?
Yeah. Probably did not know that there was a comedy club.
I mean, but doesn't it feel good, as a Tyler native, and then also as a comic performing there, knowing like, look at all this untapped potential for comedy fandom out here. Look at all these people who might, some of them aren't really going to like it. It's just not their thing. But how many of them are going to go like, man, that was awesome, and we can come back next week and do it again if we wanted.
It's just another date night item, right? Like it's another thing that you can take, a date to and enjoy, or, get some friends together. because there wasn't a lot of options, and now there's several options. And I know you've talked about this like with different people, like with Niaz here, talking about like the more comedy shows that are being produced, it's better for everybody. Right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like the more cultural things there are to do in a town, it helps the other people. And like that's what I did an article. So for anyone who doesn't know, I'm a journalist as well. I did an article for Texas Monthly about Tyler a couple of years ago and about the cultural renaissance there. And I talked to Rick Alteif, who runs Rick's downtown, and that was his thing. Was like he wants more restaurants downtown. Yeah. And people were like, "Why would you want that? You were the only game down there." He's like, "Because the more people that are coming downtown, the more people that are going to come to my restaurant."
Yeah, everybody wins.
Right, and he actually owns 2 restaurants down there. Like he just opened another one because he's like, the more people are coming, the more everybody gets business, you know? And it's the same thing in comedy. It's the same thing in anything like cultural. Like if people are in the mood to have fun and enjoy themselves, they're going to do it. They're going to have a good time. And then they might come to your thing next time.
Well, and that's what I noticed just being at the club, right? Like I love those downtown areas, the way they're built. Right. You know, they're super walkable. Yeah. They just need the things to walk to there. Yeah. Because even when I was pulling up, it's like I loved how the club has these big glass windows and they're not hiding the stage. Like from the street, you see it all. And it was just kind of glowing like this beacon. And I was like, fuck yeah, that's pretty cool. So it's like, then my mind immediately started racing on the drive home of like, man, if they just had other things that people were coming here for on this side of town where you're just walking by and you're like, is that a comedy club? And like, you could literally, if there's a seat open, pop in. Yeah. Or you could see that it's sold out and it's like, it's such a small setting. It's like you could stand on the sidewalk and hear some of the jokes if you wanted. You know what I mean? Which is, it's got its own charm to it.
It was a little disconcerting when someone would open the door during the set because you could hear the road noise.
Yeah, you hear
like, whoa, like. And I was also like, where were you going? Why did you leave during like the restrooms this way?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is a really cool thing. And you know, shout out to those guys for taking a chance, right? Because it's like whenever you start something in a town that doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And there's another comedy club in Tyler called The Understudy. So
I didn't know that.
To them as well.
Yeah, cool.
I just don't know much about it. But I mean, I think they both started about the same time. So either way, like that was a new concept. And so you have an entire city. And whenever we're talking about Tyler, we're also talking about all of these surrounding cities. So we're talking about like Palestine and Henderson and Jacksonville and Brownsboro and Chandler, all the way over to Longview, you know, even up to like north to like Pittsburgh, like all these towns, those people typically, if they do anything fun, are driving to Tyler. And so Tyler is 100,000 people. There might be 300,000 people that would consider Tyler sort of like where you're going or you go for work. That's why traffic can be kind of bad at Tyler because like it's a lot more people than actually live there. And so you don't only have Tyler, but you have a lot of these country, you know, more country towns, but there's a lot of people that you just sort of need to educate on what comedy is, how it works. I mean, we were talking to Christopher. He was like, I field a lot of calls that are just like, what is a show?
Yeah,
what are the mechanisms of a show?
Yeah.
And I get it because before I got into comedy, I didn't know the answer to any of those questions either. I mean, none, you know? And
and I, you know, friends and family of mine, it's like they know I do this podcast, they know we go to stuff, and they still don't really even get it of like what a comedy show is sometimes. And you'll talk to them about it, and they're like, so... You know, they're like literally asking you for the breakdown of like, so once I sit down, how does it actually happen? And then you just forget. It's like, I'm just spoiled. We have lots of clubs, lots of options. Right. We live here in Dallas, so we can go see so much stuff. And so, yeah, it is interesting to go like, wow, there's that many people who truly have never experienced it. And that's what gets me more optimistic and just excited because the other side of it from the fans, it's like how many of the comics on the show that I saw that night were from Tyler? 4?
So Jason was, Nikki was, and Jared was. So three of the 5.
3 of the 5, yeah. So I just started thinking immediately about not just Tyler, but like you said, the surrounding areas. You know, it's like these people are not going to drive an hour and a half to go see what an open mic is to see if they can tell a joke in Dallas or whatever, wherever else is close. So how many funny people are you missing out on? How many funny people who just don't know that they can perform comedy? You know, they just never do. It's like
and also like
if Kobe never picked up a basketball.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There might be somebody out there who's the next, you know, Dave Chappelle, whoever, insert your favorite comic, and they just, you know, they didn't know there was a stage, but now that there are stages, And then these little surrounding areas, it's like, let's go. Let's get some more comics, you know?
Well, and it's also, who are some of the funniest comedians out there? It's Nate Bargatze from Old Hickory, Tennessee, right? It's, Dusty Slay has his special.
Yeah.
Like these guys, these people that are from like these really small insulated places, and they're the ones who had the impetus to go to a big city and try this thing. But how many of those people are just still out there in some small town, and they just need somebody to go, hey, like just go to this club that's over here in, Birmingham or Tyler or Shreveport or, Monroe or like all these places, like these cities that are really surrounded by all these really small towns. Like you got a lot of people that are really, really funny.
Well, and like, I think we talked about it a little bit that night. It's like, how many people did you grow up with where like their dad or their uncle or somebody was just the funniest person? And they're just the guys just bullshitting on the job site or something or at work or wherever. And they're just hilarious, just constantly turned on. But they've never been told like, you should like form that into a thing. You're pretty hilarious. And to your point about like Nate Bargatze, like his most recent special where he was in the round, I think that was his most recent, right?
Yeah, it was.
That was the first time I've ever sat down and watched a full set of his, like a full long-form set. Yeah. And it kind of blew my mind because my favorite comic that I feel like I just relate to really well, like I won't say he's the best, but I think he's one of the best, is Bill Burr. I just relate to his anger, his frustration with everyday, with like the stuff that makes you want to rage punch strangers.
Right.
And you don't, and then you hear someone else is that crazy and you're like, oh, okay, it actually calms me down.
Right.
But now I feel like Nate Bargatze is coming in right behind him because there was just this incredible, like, everyman quality where it's like, God, I feel that way. I feel that way so much. And, like, the stuff, like, he talked about, like, his sister or something. Being super broke and bought a jet ski and a boat or something. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I grew up with those people. Yeah. You know, that was the town I was in, man.
Right.
And so, yeah, to your point, it's like, those people exist. And I think that's what makes them really, really funny is, like, I get real cautious about areas like Austin right now. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to be fine. They're doing great down there. But you get you potentially, I don't know if they are, potentially could get so pigeonholed into, we're so deep into comedy, we're going to these extremes. And it's like, sometimes you roll back and just have more casual funny.
Yeah.
And it's really good.
That's that is definitely my hot take. We're going to get into the Cat Williams segment.
We talked about it before. It's like, burn it down, man. I need the views.
I need my cognac. Let me take a sip of my cinnamon apple tea.
Yeah.
No, that is my hot take. I mean, just my thought on the Austin scene. And look, I'm not out there. I don't know anything about it beyond I did one open mic and I just listen and pay attention to what's going on. And what I saw at that one open mic was I don't know, I think it was like, I probably saw 45 people go, and I was halfway in. And actually, Nimesh Patel, who was also there, and I was going to stay around, and he was like 30 behind me. Wow. And he was like probably 15 behind me, but they kept inserting people. And so I was like, dude, I'm not hanging around. And he was like, don't. But it was a lot. I would say probably 70% of the people who went on stage. And obviously an open mic is just everybody, right? So you can't judge an entire scene. But it was just a bunch of people who were like, I'm on a lot of drugs. Isn't that funny? And it was like, no. Yeah. Jokes about drugs are funny. Jokes about what drugs make you do or not do or whatever. Like that's can be funny, right? But it was just like, I'm on drugs. What's the most extreme thing I can say now? Right. And you get the laughter from the other people who are like laughing at the idea that you would say that. Yeah, it's so shocking. But that's not comedy. And if you go to a real audience, that doesn't translate, right? Right. And there's I just saw a lot of that where, and then every once in a while there would be like, oh my gosh, that person's one of like an incredibly funny, or I saw a couple just like famous people, right? Like I was like looking at it and I was like, wait, pull them up on my Instagram. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's that guy. Like he has 50, so it was actually really cool because there's like that balance, but there was just a lot of exactly what you're talking about where there's so much concentration there. Everybody in the world who thinks, or in, at least Texas, who thinks they're going to be a comedian, and identifies with more of that style of comedy is converging on that space, and you get a whole lot of chaff, right? A whole lot of just garbage And it can make it really hard for the, cream to the rise of the top, because it's like, man, I got to sit through all this if I want to tell my 3 minutes of jokes. And I mean, I think it's not really a coincidence that, who's the biggest comedian out of Texas right now? It's Ralph, right?
Right. Yeah, I would say
and he's
Ralph.
from Dallas,
Yeah.
a scene where he was able to go do real jokes and get rewarded for real work and learn how, you and you guys were talking about this, like the joke is the king here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a real reason why he was able to rise out. And then there's a lot of really good people in Austin, but none of them have hit as big as he did because he came from a scene that was a little different. And I'm not trying to, whatever. I don't know that much. I'm like really new to this, but that's just my perception is that when you get so many people in one area, it just makes it, it just can make it hard.
But that's why I like talking to a mixture of it'd be easy to just get people who have been doing this, 10 plus years on the show and let them tell you how comedy should be. But I think there's a lot to be learned when you insert new opinions in, because it's a craft that constantly evolves anyway.
Right.
So I think there is something like when you, Neos, come on here who have less time in it than other people, but you're still passionate about it.
Right.
Because you have a fresh perspective on, you just inserted yourself into this scene. You're new to this scene. So you don't know any of the cliques. You don't know any of the drama. You don't know the owners of the clubs. You don't know the things that go around. So you have a fresh set of objective eyes. And I think that that's good to have. It's like any thriving business, right? If you had a really successful business, you're going to have your veterans who have been there since it opened the doors or whatever. You're going to have your mid-tier people, and then you're going to have your brand new people. If you have only veterans, it doesn't work that great because eventually these people all have to retire and now you're fucked. Mm-hmm. If you have only mid-level people, there's the one-off thing that comes up every now and then that the veterans knew how to fix and you don't.
Right.
And then if you have all new people, obviously it's pretty rough too.
Right.
And so you got to have that blend. And so I think it's important to have the new, as long as they take the writing and the performance part very seriously, they care about it as a craft, then I think it's great to judge it. I think it's healthy, I do think, that show that I went to out at Tyler, you guys had, like you said, your high school friends didn't get their tickets in time.
Some of them did, some of them didn't.
So it was an older crowd, right?
It was
And for a couple of the comics, it's like, that was a quick lesson on,
it was.
Okay, we found a weak spot or two in your game because this stuff that was a little too edgy for that crowd was harder for you to pull out of.
Yeah.
And they did fine. The show was still I had a great time, by the way. I loved the show. I thought they were all very funny, but I just recognized there was about 7 people in front of me who were like, this is not my style of funny.
Right.
But that group right there, how many people do they represent in the country?
Probably half.
Right? So it's
large percentage.
So if you can make them laugh, man, you've got a solid fan base going.
Right.
Yeah. It's not a group to neglect, I guess, is my point.
Exactly. And I did have some of those conversations backstage with the comics, and not from like I'm telling you what to do kind of perspective, but they were just like, man, I realized I've got to be able to pivot to some sort of cleaner or just more generally acceptable jokes. If I try a couple things and I got to do 15 minutes and 4 minutes in, I'm like, oh, they're not on board with this. I can't just be like, well, here's 11 more minutes of stuff you don't like.
Let's keep talking about a dick.
Right, exactly. And so there was some conversations, and I was just, that is a big benefit of being in Dallas, where you have Backdoor, which does encourage, and obviously you have to be clean there. And because Backdoor is an important place to go, it has gotten a lot of comedians who probably would never want to do a clean set, who would feel like it's lame or whatever, to understand the value of doing that. And the value of like, hey, if I get booked at a corporate event, like I got to be able to tell jokes that a 60-year-old white guy and white lady might like. You know what I mean? So those kind of things you learn because you're here. Whereas, being Tyler's awesome. And one of the great benefits of being in Tyler, if you're doing comedy, that one of the guys that was on the show with me, Jared, he did 15. He then went to the understudy on Saturday, did 15 there. And, those opportunities, if you're consistent and you're good, the talent pool is lesser. And so you're going to get a lot more opportunities to do long sets. So there's a benefit there. But then the drawback is you don't have that competition. You don't have the experience of people sort of teaching you those kind of things about like, hey, having some clean stuff is really beneficial to you in your career. You may not like it, but it can really, really help you. Now, if you want to be principled, quote unquote, and like never do it, okay, but like these are the situations you could run into because you can't like pivot, you know? And so it was, you know, I did feel bad because I was like, this is my crowd that I brought. And they didn't ask for this, but like,
but I don't think you should view it that way.
Yeah,
I think you should view it as I brought a crowd.
Well, yeah,
because that's hard to do.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, how many people wish they could bring 50 people to a show?
Right.
So you did your part as someone on the show, which is I brought a crowd.
Right.
And now it's everyone's responsibility to go, we got to make them laugh.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and that is the great thing about comedy is the audience is always is always in charge, right? Mm-hmm. They're the ones that are always determining whether you know what you're doing or not, right? Like, and it changes so often. And it's really difficult. And
I've talked about it on here before. I think there should just be a whole Harvard field of study on the room environment based on crowds,
dude. Yeah,
you know, because you can feel it. You know, depending, not even just the room, like the walls. I'm just talking the people only. If you go to any club, you know, 7 or 8 shows in a row, it feels different each show before anyone's ever spoken a word on the stage. Dude, there's just a different feeling in the air. And I don't know how to dissect it. I'm sure somebody who's been doing comedy for 20, 30 years can tell me why, but it's fascinating. You're just like, this crowd feels this way. Like this one feels tight already.
Right.
Even though nobody's spoken.
Right.
This one's sloppy and drunk already. There's just different vibes before a word is spoken.
And it's also like one of the things that I think is really interesting is like what their expectation is affects how you'll do in a lot of ways. And the types of jokes that work is based on the expectation. Like, for example, Arun's This Just Happened show.
Yeah. I love that show.
So yeah, I was really excited to do it, and I did local news, and I wrote a bunch of like local news, just like one-liner type jokes, very like late night style.
Were y'all in the large room or the small room? Is it DCC still, right?
Yeah. It was a small room.
Small room.
Yeah. And it was a really light crowd that night. It was December, and there may have been, I don't know, there was definitely less than 20 people there.
Okay.
And but I wrote a bunch of jokes that are not normally my style. And I get like kind of absurdist with it, and I did these weird bits and whatever. But I was like, this is a chance to like really stretch my legs or whatever, you know, just really like stretch how I do this thing. And I brought the paper up like I was a newscaster. I did this whole thing, and it was great. Like people laughed, they loved it. You know, the video I have is awful, but like I promise, I've gone back and watched it, and like they really liked the jokes that I told. And I sent it to people. I sent it to Kevin Deanda, who does Deadgood with me. And like, we were like kind of writing partners. We just really like help each other out with comedy and stuff. And he was like, dude, some of those jokes are so good. They need to be a part of your normal set.
Nice.
You know, not like just throw away one-liner, you know.
That's got to feel good because that's kind of the point of that show, right? Just
exactly.
Stretch your legs and see what you can get.
Yeah, it was super cool. And so what I did, one, because the video was awful, and I was like, man, these are too good. I need to get them on some kind of video. So I did them the exact same way at the open mic on Monday at the Comedy Arena, just to get like a good video of them, whatever. They did different ones hit there than did 3 days before at DCC. Okay, that's kind of weird. Well, then we did our Deadgood show, and I brought a couple of those back. I did like 3 minutes of those in my 7-minute set. And they didn't really hit near as good. Like it was weird. And who knows why, who knows, you know, with the audience. But my theory is the people came to the This Just Happened show to hear sort of topical humor jokes.
Right.
They're okay. And my jokes weren't political, but they're okay with like newsy kind of things. But I feel like if you're just a normal comedian doing that in a normal set, it feels maybe hacky or like it just is not the right vibe.
And does Arun the couple of shows I went to, I thought I remember him setting it up as these are new jokes that all these people worked on. It's about like he kind of lays the groundwork.
Yeah, it was definitely
that way. If you just stumbled into it, you still kind of understand what's happening.
It was definitely explained. Like this is you're going to see some new stuff. Like and you know, like I'm not going to. Some of them didn't go well.
Oh no,
some people had some really difficult topics.
It's it's a great writing exercise. As a comedy fan, I enjoy watching it because I know some of the people on those bills. I've seen them multiple times. I know they're hilarious.
Right.
And I like watching somebody that I know is funny sweat a little. You know, it reminds me like, yeah, they still have to work for it. It's and like you said, it's hit or miss. 3 people might go up and it might be rough because everyone's kind of winging it. You know? And I don't know. I really enjoy that show and shows like that. Just seeing people work. But I also love going to open mics, and people don't get that.
Kind of a freak, so
yeah,
I don't even like going to open mics. I'm on the open mics.
There's something about the process, man. You just gotta separate yourself from a performer who's trying to hustle, right? I think a lot of y'all as comics, you know, you're honed in on your set. You're honed in on what you're working on. And I think even though you're fine with other people succeeding, it's competitive, right? So everybody's a little bit of a shark in the water. Like, I want to have a good set tonight, and I want everyone else to not have I want them to have a good set, but I want my set to be better, right?
Yeah, there's part of that for sure.
And if you can pull out of that and just enjoy watching them like wiggle a little, trying to get that laugh, and then when they seize it, or then 3-6 months later, you see them nail it, and you're like, they finally brought it around. But, you know, I tried taking my wife with me, and she fucking hates it.
Yeah.
It's pretty brutal.
Yeah, so when I first started, I mean, I didn't know anything about... I was a big comedy fan, but I didn't have any thoughts of, like, I'm going to do comedy. I just wanted to try some open mics, see what happens. And the first one went pretty well. And
Where was your first open mic?
Backdoor.
Yeah. Is that open mic difficult to get on as a new person? Brand new? 'Cause
it varies. Sometimes they get really packed, and it's like you call and they're like, there's no space. But you gotta, you know the bit of like you gotta call the week before, and they, and Jane answers, and the TV's on, and it's like,
that's right. You told me. She just kind of explained it.
Yeah. So she's like, what are you doing? I want to get on the open mic, and of course, everyone who's like doing it for the first time is extremely nervous, right? So they're like, I want to get on the open mic. Is that okay? Like, is that allowed? And she's like, okay. Have you ever done it before? And you're like, no. And she's like, okay. So this is a clean club. No 4-letter words, no bathroom humor, no sex talk, no acting it out, like that kind of thing. And you're like, okay. And they're like, show up at, I don't want to get it wrong, but like show up before a certain time to, get your name on the list. And then the way Backdoor works, and again, I don't want to speak, whatever. They make the list for like when you go up, and it's essentially based on like how much skin in the game you have. Sure,
yeah. Well, that's why I was asking. So as a brand new, I'm surprised you got time, because they have a lot of very loyal performers that are there constantly.
Well, so you at the very, very, very end. Okay. So if you're new, they will put you at last, or second to last, or third to last. So the last 3 people are always brand new, or it's their second time, which is hilarious. Like you'll see, it's like so when I went, I was very last, I think. And there was a guy that went before me, who had lost a bet in his fantasy football league.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was one of those. So he had all his boys.
What sucks is they probably crushed, right?
Oh, yeah. His boys loved it.
Yeah.
But they were laughing at him having to go up there. He tried. He told real jokes.
Yeah.
Like he wrote jokes, and, I've never seen him since.
Yeah.
It wasn't, he didn't kill it or anything, but like they loved it. They had a good time. So it was like a good time for them. They had buckets of beers, and I was like, okay, this is like cool. But then I was nervous because like, I got to go up there, and like the only audience is this guy's boys, and I'm before him. So they're like, get this dude off the stage so my boy can get up there and crush,
Yeah.
So like that night, like there were plenty of new people. So I don't know. Sometimes I've heard that they will get like so busy that you call a week ahead and they're like, we're already, already had some people. I don't know. I don't go very often because it is kind of an inconvenient timing for me. And then just the, going later, it's hard, but to get to go earlier, you got to kind of really go pretty often, and just the time investment wasn't as worth it for me. But I've been in the scene long enough. I know enough people that I think if I went again, I would certainly not.
How long have you been in it now?
So
you're around a 2-year mark, right?
Sort of, yeah. So I did my first open mic in October 2021.
Okay.
Then I did another one in January 2022.
Okay.
And then I took like 6 months off. Those were just kind of one-off things.
Yeah.
Then I did it again in July of 22. So that's when I say I started, because I did one in July of 22. Then I started like...
So 21 was Backdoor.
Yeah.
22 was where?
So I get it mixed up, but... So January 22 was also Backdoor.
Okay. So you did 2 Backdoors first.
Yeah, that was the only place I knew to do it.
Yeah.
And that was a weird one because that was like, there was still COVID stuff. And so there was like nobody there in January 22. Like by the time I went, it was like my two friends, they were both filming me, so they weren't laughing, which I was like, I brought you to laugh,
They're just dead quiet holding a camera.
Yeah, they lived like really close. They live really close to Backdoor in Richardson. So I was just like, come on, like this is like a fun night. We'll have some beers, like, whatever, And so they were like, cool, let's do it. But like by the time I went up, there was like 7 people there and there was no laughter. And like, I just felt like, all right, maybe that's not really that fun,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I got the itch again in July of 22. And I think I went to Backdoor again. And then I can't remember which time was which, but I think either that time or the next time I went was when I met Sylvia
McBateman. Yeah.
So she was like running a light or something, and she knew a friend of mine who had come just to watch. One of my friends who had come to the original or the one earlier. They had a good time, so they came to another one, and she knew one of him. She knew him, and then we just kind of chatted afterwards, and then she had seen my set, and she reached out that week and was like, "I'm doing my first like." Showcase kind of show where I'm picking the lineup at the Comedy Arena in McKinney. Do you want to be on it? And I was like, yeah. I didn't even know what a show was. I was like, yeah.
Because you're what, 4 open mics in?
Either my 3rd or 4th open mic. Wow. I'm not sure which. I didn't tell her that.
Of course not.
Yeah. And she was like, okay, yeah, so you'll get like 7 minutes. Do you have 7 minutes? And I was like, let's see, I did 3 the first time, 3 the second time. So I've done like 9 total minutes of comedy. So yeah, I have 7 minutes. Like I was like, yeah, I will by September.
Yeah.
And so when I got that, I started doing more, and then I did the Comedy Arena, which because they had like 5-minute sets, and then I started doing some other stuff like, and so yeah, that's when I say I started was July, and it really only, and I tell Sylvia this all the time, but like I would not be doing this if she had not like given me that belief of like, hey, you were like good enough that you could be on a show just from seeing me at 1 3-minute. I was like,
was it also because you had a deadline? You had to work on something now?
Oh yeah. And that's how I work. Like I have to have something like that to get stuff done. And so once I was like, well, I said I could have 7 minutes. Well, I got to figure out what those 7 minutes are. So I've got to start going to places. I got to start working things out, figuring out what it even feels like to be on stage more, that kind of thing. And so, I started going more and started meeting, people through that. And a funny story about the Comedy Arena mic is, actually the second time I went to Backdoor in January, I saw this guy, Nimesh Patel, and he went up there and he does a freaking, and I can say this because he doesn't do this bit anymore, a 3-minute bit about Bibb and Tucker's dry cleaning.
Okay.
And it was so perfectly worded and written and performed.
Yeah.
And so niche. So specific. But my friends and I were going, we've had this conversation.
Yeah.
Because he's basically saying he thought it was a restaurant like a Cheesecake Factory.
Same.
He's like, again, I'm not taking his bit because I don't think he does it, but he's like, I knew the menu. and he gets in, and it was just so perfect. And I thought, this dude is amazing. He's been in comedy forever. And, we said hi, fist bump, whatever, and then he heads out. So then I go to the Comedy Arena mic like 6-7 months later, and I see him, and I was like, yo, hey, like I saw you do that Bibb and Tucker's bit. And he was like, oh, I don't even do that anymore. And the whole time I'm thinking he's been in for like 10 years. And I find out like a year later that might have been his first open mic or his second one. But I was like, okay, this guy's different, right? And like that's what I really like about open mics. I said I didn't like it, but I do really like it when you go, that person's different. And you just see it. Yeah. Like there are people who are just different. And sometimes it's because they've been doing it for 20 years. Sometimes it's the first time they ever walk on stage and there's just something about them. They've got it. And they just have to keep working at it to keep improving. But yeah.
That's 100% what I love about the open mic. The problem is you've got to sit through 20 psychos.
Oh my gosh.
To find that gym. But it does make finding the gym worth it.
And sometimes the psychos are the more entertaining. They're the thing you remember.
Yeah.
And then later you go, okay, but like if I wanted to go to a show, I don't want to see that. But
I've seen several meltdowns where you realize, people's grip on reality is fragile for some.
You get all types.
Yeah.
It is the most it is the most diverse place on earth, like and diverse and neurodivergent, but also just background and race and whatever. And like that's actually the ethos behind like our Deadgood Melting Pot show was just like, hey, like comedy is a wild place where it literally doesn't matter where you come from, what your perspective is, any of that. Are you funny?
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of thing is like our requirement for melting pot shows is, are you funny? Right.
Yeah.
And we want to have those shows that have people from a lot of different backgrounds. And so you can come to a show and be like, you know what? Like, I've never heard an Indian comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw freaking Arun, and he was the funniest dude ever. But then I saw Nimesh, he's also Indian, and they're totally different Indian comics. You know what I mean? Like, so you see that and you go, oh, there's not just like a pigeonhole, like that's what someone who is Indian does, or that's what, you know, and it's like you see these people that it's like everyone is actually just their own person. And that's what I really like about our shows. That's what I like about comedy. And that's what I like about, you know, that's what I learned going to the open mics early on was like, dude, these people don't know anything about me. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
They are not asking what I do for a living. They're asking about like what I find funny.
Right.
What, you know, hey, can I run this by you? Hey, like, do you, you know, and like, it's also the banter of like, you know, going after each other. Mm-hmm. And I learned that very quickly, like first few conversations outside of Backdoor where it was like, oh, like this is like what I do with my friends, but I don't know these people and it's fine. And I love that because that's like this, it breaks down barriers.
Yeah.
Because you can just straight up like say whatever, like within reason. Let me just
I have to be careful because, you know, I'm comedy adjacent, right? I don't perform, but I'll end up spending a lot of time with some of y'all. Mm-hmm. And I have to remember, you know, when I go back to work, like, do not talk like that.
Yeah. No, it is.
You know, it's like when you listen to too much rap music and you have to remind yourself, you will never say the N-word.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's in the song. It doesn't matter if nobody's riding in your car. All right? Just don't. Just don't do it. You know, you get too comfortable with it, you know?
Yeah, you know. And you also have to be like, oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't. No one should hear me listening to this. Let me turn this down as I pull up to
You do the Office Space, turn the volume down.
Yeah, dude. That's exactly right. Yeah, I even think about that with like the walk-up song I want to pick. It's like, I want to walk out to rap music. And then I got to listen to the first like 25 seconds because I really don't want there to be a moment where I'm about to say something and then they just like say the N-word. And I'm like, it's like I chose to have that play. And so I like always listen to the first like 20. I'm like, okay.
It's just a hard N-word, and then you grab the mic. Hello.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, hold on. Okay, we're good. We could play this one. I'm gonna pick this one because they don't say, like it's a real thing.
I would love to get a like an honorary position at some point in my life, picking music out for people. I would have so much fun doing that.
Dude, yeah.
There's just so much great mainstream music, but also B-side music, where if you only need, like you said, 20, 25 seconds, there's like some real bangers out there.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I want for a show. So like the Rose City show, I thought about it for a long time. I listened to a bunch of different songs and I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good. Like I want it to mean something, have a little bit of a joke or a reference to, you know, whatever. And then I got there and I was like, so do we, you know, I don't want to make it a big deal. You know, I'm like, so do y'all just like pick music for us or, you know, what do you do? And they're like, yeah, like there's like two of us that run this club and one of us is performing. So they're like, we don't really do songs for
and
people.
you're like, well, you know,
like, that's fine.
I'm the headliner and I kind of sold it out. So I'm really going to need you to accommodate me.
All right. So play Tyler by the Toadies. That's what I want.
Oh, I didn't even think about that you guys would get associated with that so much. I forget about that.
It's about Tyler.
I know, but it's just, you know, that band was so big and you just, sometimes you disassociate that, you know, you forget that people there are probably like, oh, you're probably a huge Toadies fan, right? Because you live here.
Yeah. And the subject matter of that song is not great.
No.
It doesn't reflect well on Tyler.
It's a great song though.
I know.
Great song.
But no, there's on the newer Old 97's record, I forgot what song it is, but they have a line that says, East Texas has a dark side and that darkness has its pull. And I'm like, that's true. If you know anything about East Texas, there's a dark side.
I mean, any small towns are all weird, right? They're all weird. And then especially East Texas is just another beast too, right? Because the way that it all became integrated and not like any specific race or anything, just meaning, you know, why did people start going to those towns, right? I think a lot of it was oil, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But there's also a huge influence from like Louisiana, Arkansas.
Oh, it's the furthest west of the Deep South.
It's
not really Texas. Like the culture is not Texan in stereotypically Texan ways. Now, because things are becoming more homogenized, it is, but the historical culture is very much Louisiana, Deep South, the architecture, but the geography, right? It's pine trees, it's big hills, it's, and so, and it is like, there is a really big racial element to that because, and I was like brushing up on some of this before I went back, just like reading some stuff, but I knew all this, but I was like reading more of it, but it was like, that's kind of the main area that slaves were owned in Texas was East Texas, because ranching took a while to come about because, that was most of West Texas was arid. Like you couldn't do much ranching in Western Texas. And so there was like small farms and like sort of plantation type stuff where it rained a lot in East Texas. So anyway, all that to say, there's a large African-American population in East Texas. And some of these small towns have like majority African-American populations. And so there's a lot of tension there still. Even like, but there's also like a lot of history, like a really interesting and cool African-American history. And there's like, Marshall on the border of Louisiana and Texas, has one of the oldest like HBCUs. And, there was that, the Great Debaters movie or something with like Denzel Washington. Anyways, about like that area. A lot of blues musicians, Lightning Hopkins and Freddie King. And like all these guys are from there. Leadbelly, like all it came from that area. And so there's a lot of cool history, but there's a lot of like tension there, right? But because in addition to race, you get these pockets of extreme poverty. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which always builds tension. Right. And it's the most economically disadvantaged part of the state, I think, except for maybe the border regions. But there's a lot of people that live in poverty and have for 200 years, right? Yeah. And so there's just a lot of things at play. And then I also was reading about, and this I didn't really know, but it makes a ton of sense because it's so thickly forested and so rural. It was for a long time the haven of like outlaws and people who are running from the law. Good hiding spots. You go there, and so like there's just a lot of things going on outside the law that are pretty wild. Well, any area that's wooded. Oh, dude. Right? It's so strange to think you can just disappear for a while. Forever. They're not going to look for you. You can build a little shack out there, and as long as you're not, burning a fire too big or anything, nobody's going to find you. Dude, you want to do something terrifying? No, I don't. Like really interesting? This isn't terrifying. I've done the terrifying version of it too, but just the safe version is if you go on Google Maps and go on like the Sabine River. Okay. Which is like kind of this creepy, muddy, but very important river in East Texas. And it, obviously flows all the way down to the Gulf. But if you zoom in on some parts of the Sabine River, you will see that there are lots of people that live in floating house shacks on the river. And these houses, they have, on just wood that float on the Sabine River, which is alligator infested, snakes, mud. It is not a nice place to live. And they've tied their houses to trees, and they just live on the Sabine River. And that these people are not living in 2024, right? And there's a lot of them. And I've spent a decent amount of time out in the woods, and I've come across one of these before. Like you just walk and you're like, oh my gosh. And I mean, maybe they were really nice people, but I didn't stick around. No, well, and just the clash of, like you said, the version of life you're living right now versus the version of life they're living. Like they're living there trying to survive on these extremely limited means, and you're like out here for a hike. Right. Yeah. Or how much are you going to bond over right now? Yeah. Like you're hunting for fun. They're hunting for food, right? Like it's a whole different level of existence. And there's actually a really interesting book that this guy, oh my gosh, am I going to screw up his name? Wes Ferguson, wrote, where he and his buddy, they got in a canoe and they canoed the Sabine River. And if you go like, once it gets for like southeast parts of Texas, you're talking very rural, deep East Texas. And like the book opens, the first line is, the first day we were on the Sabine, we got shot at. And the guy literally goes, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were my brother. Yep. That's the greatest. Like, it's just a little book this guy wrote. Like, he's a great writer. He wrote for Texas Monthly for a long time. But like, I'm like, that's the best opening story to a book ever. I'm sorry, I thought you were my brother. Like, how does that make it better? And they invited them up. They're like, come on up. They were on a bluff and they're like looking over the river. Invited them up, had like some beers with them, chatted with them, and they were like, we're so sorry we shot at you. It's like, but I want to know more about why you were shooting at your like, why did that make it okay? But like, is that like, that's just like the level of what's going on. And that's like, you know, that talking about Tyler again, but like Tyler's the city, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lots going on, like modern, everything you need in the city, but not, I mean, I'm talking 10 minutes outside of Tyler or less. That's where you are. And it's a really, really interesting clash of cultures. But I think in that there's a lot of funny people that maybe need the opportunities to get to out to the mic.
Yeah. And you know, I'm always down for any opportunity for someone to find their thing, right? Whatever that thing is for you. It's just, I just want you to be able to experience enough that you find whatever it is that makes you feel excited and happy.
Right.
You know, it's like, I don't care if it is living on a floating house on the Sabine River. If that is just the way you love to live and it makes you happy, great. But I want you to have options out of there if you don't like that. That area is, you know, I think when I really started thinking about that area the most was Charlie Crockett. You know, because doesn't he come from the East Texas, kind of Louisiana area a little bit,
He's
right?
from like far southeast Texas.
But that blend of kind of Texas and kind of Cajun and kind of, it just starts getting confusing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then when he came here to Dallas, you know, he'd gone to, I think, California and then New York and then Dallas.
He was in Germany for a bit too as well.
Okay, yeah. And so by the time he got here, he kind of knew, it felt like he knew what he was wanting to do. He was still very unknown, but it felt like he found an identity for himself, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, like my wife and I, you know, we were lucky enough to catch him in really small venues here before he released his In the Night album that kind of started taking off.
Oh, yeah, that took off, yeah.
And so he had done an album before that was more low budget, very cool. And it's like, we're literally watching him in a small bar, just, you know, saying like, you can tip me whatever you want and take the album, please. Just take it for free if you want it. But there was a feel, like even his music, and like you could tell just kind of even the way he was surveying us as an audience here in Dallas.
Yeah.
It's almost like he had very much calculated, like, it's almost like he had one up on you. Like he knew, I know exactly how to play to this type of group, this type of person. All to say, it's like, it feels like there's a little bit of, I don't know, like a little bit of like wiliness to that East Texas, like almost, it's like if you did live on, I'm not saying he did obviously, but it's like if you did live on a floating house and then all of a sudden you found your way into a city with a guitar or something and you were like making things happen, it's like, I don't think you're going to be bothered by much of anything.
Yeah.
You know, there's like a weird confidence with it, maybe, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And I think, for sure. I think there's a lot that comes from when you come from a different place and you aren't ashamed of that. People are drawn to that. And you're right. I think that's a good way of putting it. It kind of gives you a one-up on everybody else of just like, I know I'm not like you, but right now I'm the guy on the stage singing the song or telling the jokes or whatever it is. And it gives you that advantage. And that's what, like, you know, we talk about like Dusty Slay, right? Like,
very similar.
If he walks into, you know, a Target, you're like, what's this guy doing here? But if he walks on stage, you go, this guy's going to have something interesting to say.
I was going to say,
look, right?
You know now that your life and what you've done is more interesting to these people than it is. They're going to listen to you.
Right.
You're like, all you got to do is keep them, but they're going to listen because they think, ooh, this is so different. This is so interesting.
Yeah, and that's like when I wrote that article, I don't know if you saw that, but before I went to Rose City, of just kind of like what it means to me and like what it means to feel from Tyler. And I said, like, I don't have an accent. And everybody in Tyler sort of does. Now, maybe you didn't experience that because you weren't there very long, and the people you talked to weren't like in Tyler their whole lives and everything. But if you go around town for not very long, you realize that like a majority of people have some kind of East Texas accent, which an East Texas accent is different than like a Texas accent. It's more like Old South a little bit. Not old, not like Savannah, but like...
I know what you mean. It's that blend of what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. And so...
Not quite Old Savannah, not quite Texan.
Right. It's it's different. And so I don't have that. And that was on purpose, right? Like I didn't want to sound like people like that. And
I had the same small town angst that made me go, I am going to change this.
Right, exactly.
And when I get several beers deep and excited, you'll hear it. Yeah. But outside of that, you won't.
Yeah, exactly. And I can totally do it if I need to. Yeah. But now that I do comedy on stage, and like I need an identity. I need to be remembered. I need to, there's part of me that's like, man, I wish I could just walk up here and be like, I'm from Tyler, and people are like, oh, this guy's interesting, and then like whatever I say is like, oh, it's interesting because he's from Tyler, and it just sounds different, right? And so I feel there's like, man, I kind of wish I had that, like that, uniqueness.
Nah, man, you don't need that.
No, I know.
You don't need it. Come on.
But there's just part of me that like there is a jealousy of people who have something that makes them immediately like, But
you have that as well. You just don't know it because you're you, and you've just had this slow experience of your whole life,
right?
But I think there's definitely a what do you call it? I was going to say the wrong word. That was going to sound predatorial. I didn't mean it that way.
Now I need to know what the word is.
I was going to say something like you. I don't want to say it, but anyway, it's the wrong choice. But no, there is a when you take the stage, I'm like, okay, this is someone like you're already doing very well of capturing the moment of like, it's now my time to say things and you're going to watch me for a moment.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't come up nervous and afraid. There's a confidence where I'm like, I think he's done this before. Let's see what he's got to say,
Okay.
And, I think also just being a tall person, you've probably dealt with that your whole life and just blocked out, but being tall, you automatically kind of command attention when you walk into places, not even trying, right? People just look at tall people.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. Like, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on some of the jokes I did at the show, but like I mentioned this in the bit I was talking about where I played football, where I was 5'8". Yeah, so I don't feel tall most of the time because I wasn't tall until after I was like I was probably like 6'2" when I graduated high school. I'm 6'4" now, and so I was, as a sophomore, I was like 5'8". As a junior, I was like 5'10", 5'11". I just grew really fast. But those formative years when you sort of form your identity of like who you are, how you carry yourself, how people look at you.
Right.
I was short. And so I don't think I'm short when I walk around, but I certainly, when I see a picture of myself with my friends, I'm like, oh my gosh, every time.
So you still feel like you're like 5'10", 5'11".
Yeah. And like my friends who are 6'2", that that's tall, right? And so I think that's kind of where I'm at, and then I'll take a picture with them and I'm like significantly taller than them. That blows my mind. And so like you mentioned that on stage, like maybe because I don't know that I'm so tall, I don't have that awkwardness that some tall people do have where they're trying to like not be tall.
But see, okay, that might be what it is then, because that is one of my biggest complaints, especially tall women.
Yeah.
And I know why they do it. Like there's the
course.
stereotype of like a guy should be taller than the woman, and so they want to feel smaller, but it's like tall people, if you got it, stop hunching.
Yeah.
Stop it. Just own it. Like we have a relative who was very much kind of introverted through high school and stuff, and he's very tall, and he still tries to kind of like bring the shoulders not only like forward and down, but like in, like he's trying to be smaller as well.
Now you're making me want to make sure I'm saying that.
No, but it's like that looks so strange because it makes me know you're not comfortable in your skin.
Yeah. Right.
And I've seen so many comics, not tall comics, but just people, a lot of comics are uncomfortable with themselves. That's part of the reason they're doing comedy. When you do see someone confident come on stage, it's an immediate, oh, this is probably going to be more entertaining because they seem like they're happy to be here, like they know what they're doing. So maybe it is. Maybe it's because of the fact that you just stand upright as someone who's 6'4", rather than trying to come down to our level a little bit.
Yeah. I wish I could use the mic stand more, like have it in the mic stand. But I know that when I go up there, I'm going to have to do what I did before this podcast, where
raise it
just
up,
spend 30 seconds fiddling with it. And because it's not going to be close to my height. But the other day for a Deadgood show, I wanted to use a mic stand, and I was, I think it was like third, and I asked the people before me if they were going to use it. And they're like, no. And so before the show, I just set it to my height.
There you go.
And then it became a running gag in the show because like Kenny Lee was like the first comic. If you know Kenny Lee, he's real short.
I don't think so. I don't think I've watched them yet.
He's really, really good.
Okay.
You'll love him. Really interesting style. He's fairly new, but like his style is like, I really like him a lot, but he's real short.
Okay.
And he was like, what the heck? And like, he's literally like looking up at it. And so like,
but you're creating moments for him.
I
It's
made
like,
a moment. Yeah.
I'm
so,
giving you the tools, man.
Yeah. So everybody just left it at that super tall height the whole time. And it was just a running gag of like, why is this like this? You know?
You need to invent the quick release mic stand thing.
Or bring my own on stage.
As you were saying it, I was thinking, you know how like the police, instead of the old school batons, they've got the things that they sling out, and it's like
nightstick.
Thank you, nightstick. We need to get you like a mic stand nightstick that just throws out, and you just take it up there with you.
Now that would give me a signature moment,
right? Yeah, that would be it. And it's like you can't ever let it sit still because it doesn't have the legs to support it. It's just like a monopod kind of thing.
But then at the end of the set, it retracts.
Exactly.
Like
yeah. And you just throw it back in the other dainty stand for the rest of the comics.
Dude. Okay, we got it. Yeah.
But yeah, that would be you just fling it out right when you come out there.
Yeah. The football stuff that I was doing, that was all brand new. Like just wrote it like in the days before.
Oh, how'd you feel about it that night?
I felt it went good.
But it was good.
Okay, I appreciate that because it was just such a friendly crowd, and most of them were there for a lot of those moments, or at least tangentially knew like, yeah, why did he play football? And so I was like, let me just try this because I was doing a 20-minute set. I was doing 18, but I did 20. It's fine. And so I was like, I need some story stuff. And when you're mostly doing comedy at the level I'm at, it's 5 to 7 minutes, maybe 10. I do 10 to 12 fairly regularly.
Yeah,
but
so that was one of the first times you really got to stretch your legs and kind of relax a little.
Exactly. And I've done 15 a couple of times. But this was even longer than that. And I was like, I need a story that will take up a few minutes. Obviously, trying to punch it up with jokes throughout. But like, I need something that will, people get exhausted from just like joke, And so I was working on that, and I was like, well, if there's ever a crowd that's going to like this, even just from the memory of like, they know what I looked like when I was 5'8", 160, let me just try it for them. And it went well. I'm really curious how it will go just to a totally like unknown audience.
Well, I mean, me and my buddy Chris, who were there, we loved it because we don't have the visuals,
right?
But you painted the picture well enough. But it's more of the, we won't give it away. If you want to see the bit, go watch the show because you're still forming it. But the twist at the end is so incredible. And this is true, right?
Yes, it's 100% true.
And it's like, oh my God. that to me is the comedy that I really love, are the stories that it's just like, it's so unbelievable that you have to be like, no way. That was really the thing. And then you just start going on that trip with you. So even not being from there, it still felt like all of a sudden, I'm living that moment with you. Okay. So I think it's a good bit.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And honestly, I think when you sit down more, now that you've got it out there, now that you've felt it out a little bit, there's got to be so much more you can pull out of it.
There's a lot, yeah.
When you start thinking about the real details of that day and that game and that play, when you start thinking about, the feels and the smells and the looks of things, it's all going to start coming back to you once you start thinking about it even more. Mm-hmm. And you might turn that one thing into 20 full minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
It's. I think it'll be one of your strongest bits for a little bit because there's just it's so rich with funny without you even having to try much with the bit. You know, the premise alone is just absurd.
Yeah,
it's absurd. I wish people knew what we were talking about. But go watch a show. It's a funny bit.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that feedback on that because it's funny because the reveal at the end was the one thing that I was like, I don't think I'll get big laughs because I think a lot of people already know or at least have a pretty good inclination what's gonna happen because either they were there or they're like, there's no way he did that, right?
So did they know, the people that you knew in the crowd, did they know the twist to that story?
No, I think only my parents and my football coach who was in the front row crying.
That's hilarious.
And he wasn't really, so he's actually my baseball coach. And I was pretty good at baseball. Like we won the state championship my senior year. That was my sport.
All I'm going to say, we won't ruin anything. All I'm going to say is part of what makes the joke hilarious is there was a case of mistaken identity, but we won't say how.
Yeah.
And the fact that it really, they really confused you with somebody else is just beyond funny.
Yeah, this is 100% true. And normally I'm not like I'm not precious about my jokes. We're
going to be precious about this
but
one.
this one just because it is only really funny if you don't know what's going to happen. So like I'll be a little more protective. But normally I'm like, you can say whatever because my baseball coach was, because it was a new football team. We did only have 24 guys on the team. This is all true. They made him coach offensive line.
Yeah, that's that small town stuff.
He had no offensive line background. He was a pitcher. Like he pitched in college. Like I think he had played quarterback.
Pitching's offense.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was so bad. And so he didn't want to be there. He certainly didn't want me to be there. He wanted me to be in off-season baseball. And I shouldn't have been there. And so, we had a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. He did a good job of making the camaraderie of the linemen, which is always a thing. Like linemen, we're like, oh, we're the Hogs, or, that kind of thing. Yeah. We're like, nobody wants to do this. Yeah. So let's make it
guts,
sound
no glory.
Yeah, it's terrible. But he totally was really just waiting for the season to end for himself and for me. And so when I brought it up, even just mentioning that I played football, I saw him being like, oh no,
here we go.
Here are the memories that we don't want to that we've been afraid to bring up because they were so bad. And so it was really it was a little bit distracting just because he was laughing too hard.
No, that's great, man.
But and then his wife, she was very empathetic, and so she was like, "Oh," she remembers how bad it was, and I'm like, "No, it's cool. I'm joking about it now. It's 17, 16 years later. It's cool to laugh about." But I was really excited about that.
Sorry, it started flooding back the details of the joke. Your parents' involvement.
Yeah,
we'll leave it at that. But it just started flooding back. It's like, oh God, I forgot. It was very, very funny.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it's a great bit. I mean,
appreciate that.
But also, I'm biased towards that type of material. I love comedy that when I leave, not only did I laugh my ass off, but I feel like I know a little bit more about you. Now, it's like now all of a sudden I feel like I could hang out with you. That's why when I know someone's coming on the show, it's like I have seen you before, and then I love the Deadgood stuff, and I know you're a journalist, and I like these things, but the root of it is I want to remember the comedy that I liked.
Right.
Because the Melting Pot show I went to, that's probably been like 6 or 7 months now, right?
It was end of July.
Yeah. Okay. And so it wasn't fresh on my brain, and so it's like even just going to that one show, I was like, okay, I feel like I connected this guy without talking to him at all, just by watching the show. But that's my favorite type of comedy, rather than just the set up punch. Yeah,
and
I want to get in everybody's life is so unique,
right?
I mean, your coach that you're talking about, if he wanted to do stand up comedy, he's already got this. The fact that he's a baseball coach that was forced to coach football, how many funny things are in there? That if he really just sat down and thought about it, and it's like, God, that was ridiculous.
Dude.
That either they made me do this or I chose to do that or whatever.
The conversations even we had after that where he's remembering, this was, like I said, 16, 17 years ago. Mm-hmm. He still coaches baseball at our school, not football. And but he was, he was just the absurd things he was bringing up. Like it's not necessarily hilarious, but he was just like, because I mentioned you play 2 or 3 positions. If you're good, when you have 24 guys, you're playing offense, defense, and special teams. And his son, who's 17 now, he goes, Calvi is his name. He's like, Calvi was like, I'm doing all those because his son's a great athlete. Yeah. He's like, I'm playing all those positions, and it really sucks. But he was, my coach was bringing up. He's like, our great running back was also our best linebacker, but all of our best players that season were club soccer players. Many of them played college soccer. And so this one guy played every down on offense, every down on defense, and then to end the half, kicked a 47-yard field goal to tie it 3-3. Woo! And he's like, that's the most absurd thing that we were dealing with. But it was like, you had some unbelievably cool things happening, and then also just hilariously bad things with the bottom of the roster guys who were they can't cut us because we have 24 guys. We have to be on the team, but we shouldn't be. And so it was just the weirdest mix. And the stories and that kind of stuff has been unlocked by doing that show and having to think more about what I want to do and write about, who I used to be, what I came from, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's always been a struggle for me with comedy because as a journalist, you're not really writing about yourself, right?
Right.
And I was drawn early in comedy and still am to just hilarious concepts.
Yeah.
Absurd jokes, and even things that are about me are like the things about like rap music or, you know, jokes about my, like being a parent, but it's not really about me. Like there's everyone's a parent, right? Like not everyone, but like so many people,
I know what you mean.
So there's things that like are universal concepts, but they don't really reveal anything about me that you wouldn't have sort of guessed or known. And so that was a really fun way of getting into that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to a lot of comedians. I talked to Danny B a lot, and she's really encouraged me. Like, you need stuff that people can leave the show and be like, I know more about that guy, and I relate to him because I also, maybe I didn't play football in, you know, high school, but like I did something that was really embarrassing in high school, and I still think about it, and people can relate to those kind of things. And so that was cool to like work on that, because I don't have as much of that in my sets as I want. And I think a lot of it is because I just think like I have like a pretty boring life, pretty normal. Like I'm not that interesting.
You should know better as a journalist.
I should.
Because you've talked to how many people when you interview them to, well, did you ever interview people to write, or was it always kind of writing about something without having to get into it?
Oh yeah, I've done millions of interviews.
Okay, so on your interviews, you know, everyone thinks they're boring. Everyone thinks they're uninteresting. You know, and it's only until you kind of get that guard down on them that you start showing them. And then they start thinking like, oh, I guess I have had like a pretty rich life. And it's like, yeah, you've done a lot of cool stuff, man. It's just, it was so slow. You didn't think it was that interesting.
Yeah. The most interesting people, I've talked to I've talked to a lot of famous people I've interviewed, you know, Grammy winners and Emmy winners and, you know, whatever, like big name people, Hall of Famers, like all that. And they're all really interesting, but they've been interviewed a million times.
They're always in press mode.
Yeah, and they know how to answer the questions. And like sometimes you get something really interesting, but you know, it's when you're talking to just random people out that you're like, oh my gosh, like that was really cool. And they just like happen to walk by, or they happen to be at this park, or you know, even if they expected you to talk to them, like if you can get some interesting answers out of them or ask the right questions, like it's really it's true, but I'm not the one doing it. Like this is weird to me because I'm the one that's supposed to ask the questions, right? Yeah. Like I want to ask you a lot of questions, but I'm going to let you do your job because I also do like you asking me questions. But yeah, I mean that I've, you know, hosted a bunch of podcasts. Like I've done all these kind of things where I'm the one asking the questions, and so having to think about that stuff and be able to sort of pull it out of myself for comedy is really interesting, and it's like a weird practice for sure.
My background's always been in music, and so that's why on this show I love talking to comics and musicians and whoever I want, but that's what it's rooted in. But over the last couple of years, you know, it's really opened my eyes to what's so special about comics versus other artists like musicians.
Right.
And it is that ability to just shamelessly embarrass yourself to strangers. Because even on this show, like comics come in, and when you're talking to them on here, 99% of the time they're an open book. I don't have to try. They just talk, you know, and I just have to make sure we're going whatever direction I would like. Musicians, there's always that cool factor.
Yeah, they
got to be cool. I want to be a certain way. I want to be perceived a certain way. There's not as much, you know, I don't care what people like. I want to look like I don't care, but God, I really care, you know. Yeah. Whereas comics, they'll just say like, I really care what you think of me. I'm not going to try that hard because I don't care. I care, but I don't care. You know, they don't care enough to put in a bunch of effort to make you think they are a certain way, and they'll just embarrass themselves, and they're fine. And that's the charm of their, I mean, that's why I wanted to work with Lawrence on his special, is some of the stuff he talks about, you know, at this point it's out, go watch TRENA, please. But, you know, he's a former meth addict who did sexual acts for some meth. You know what I mean? And things that you just don't share with people.
Yeah.
And he turns it into his closer. For strangers, you know? And it's like, that's obviously not all of the subject material, but it's a huge part. It's like, I can't believe that if that was me, I would be so embarrassed that anyone ever found out anything about that part. Right. I would be burying it for my whole existence. I would not associate with anyone who knew me then. You know, that would be my first instinct, would be to separate completely now that I'm sober and better. And instead he's like, no, we're going to throw it in the act. It's like, damn, that's just, comics are just a different breed like that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think all art is some version of sort of like cutting yourself open and being like, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the more guarded you are in that, the less interesting it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the musicians that are the most open to doing that in their art are the ones that we appreciate the most. And also the ones that like can be the most problematic, right? Like Kanye West, he tells you everything he thinks.
Yeah.
And that's resulted in some of the greatest music of the 21st century. And it's resulted in some of the most problematic statements and the weirdest behavior. And it's like, you can't sometimes take one without the other. And there's a piece of that with all art. And then comedians is even more so of like, hey, here's me, but I'm going to dress it like, here's the dirty, the inside, the stuff that like you shouldn't say or think, or things that I have buried down. But if I say it in this context and you laugh at it, you had a good time from my pain, and I feel better about sharing that. And we all walk away feeling a little bit better about ourselves.
Yeah.
And then there's the connection, right? Like, I think it's much different. I don't know if this is true, but like, I would feel like the audience after a comedy show, when they see a comedian off stage, is a lot more like feeling like they can just have a good conversation with them than if they watched a musician sing like a really heart-wrenching love ballad, right?
Yeah.
Then you're like, ooh, you know, like that's kind of sad, you know, but
yeah.
there's just, I feel like there's that barrier is broken when you are able to say these things that like embarrass you or whatever. And then people are like, oh, like me too. You know, let's have a good conversation. Like,
well, that's the beauty of it, right? Is one good comedy show with a good comic that does put it all out there, right? Everyone almost has a sigh of relief, because even going to a comedy show for a lot of people, right? You're going out. It's a date night, or it's something that's out of the norm. So hopefully you're putting on like your nice clothes or whatever. You're kind of on edge a little bit because we're doing a thing,
right?
And then
it could go wrong.
Yeah, and as soon as a good comic comes out and relieves that tension, and it's like, no, we're all just people, and people fuck stuff up all the time, all the time. Like that weird thought you're having, I just said it out loud. Now you realize like 150 other people have that same weird thought.
Yeah,
you know, and it is a beautiful thing that you know, an art form that starts where almost everyone talks about dick jokes somehow gets to be this thing that actually is clever and brings people together. You know,
right?
Because to go from an open mic to some of these well-crafted, you know, just pick your Mount Rushmore of comics, to go like, wow, it all started down here in this underbelly.
Yeah, we all came up in the mud.
And it's crazy to me that, I mean, you know, you go to open mic, it's like, why does every dude go for the same, most of them go for the same like dirty, shocking jokes in the beginning of their comedy career? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They all go there, and then it takes them like a year or two to work it out of their system, or they just never progress, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, I guess that's just where everyone starts, you know?
Yeah, and you know, that's something that I you know, from the beginning have been trying to be really conscious of, is like to be different and to not start from that same place. And,
right.
And you know, to just have like, okay, when you see my set, whether you like it or not, you're like, okay, well, he was able to do a whole 10 minutes and not touch those same subjects that everybody's touched.
Mm-hmm.
So like, even like not from like an inappropriate standpoint or whatever you want to call it, but like if I am watching an open mic, or if I'm at a show and I see that multiple comedians have touched like the same topic that I have thought about doing a joke for, or that I have a joke for, I will consciously try and change that joke, or try and change it to where I'm like, it's unique enough, or it's so unique that no one would be like, I've heard this type of joke before. Mm-hmm. And I'm not perfect at it, but like that's something that I try to be really conscious of. Like, I'm not doing the same thing, because I'm tall, but like I'm pretty generic looking. And so I understand that like I could do a whole set and people could forget it. And so I try to make sure that like, if I'm talking about stuff, it's got to stand out and be different. And I'm certainly not there yet, but that's what I work on. And even like I talked about, like I do like the rap jokes. When I first started doing jokes about like rap music, I was like, the funny thing is that me, who looks like this listens to rap.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw Shane Gillis has a joke that's almost the exact setup that I had my setup. And of course, I had no idea he did that before I was doing a joke like this. So like, okay, so I changed like the way I did it. So it's like, that doesn't sound the same. It's not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You could joke about universal concepts, right? But like, I want to make sure that nobody would be like, that's Shane Gillis joke. Like he gets that no matter when he came up with it, he gets it, right? Like that's, you don't get the benefit of the doubt when you're a nobody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, let me change that. Well, then I saw Zach Webb, who is great.
He's someone I still have yet to see, and I've just heard so many good things, and I'm just trying to catch his shows, and it just doesn't line up with my schedule.
Yeah.
But everyone has good things to say about him.
Yeah, I've only seen him once. It was at the Cowabunga show, and it was amazing. Killed. And he had a joke. It was a similar setup as well, of just kind of like the starting point is like, isn't it kind of funny that I listen to rap and look like this? Now, where he goes with it is nowhere close to where I would go with it.
Okay.
And I was freaking doubled over laughing. It's an amazing bit. But I was like, okay, like this is to me becoming too common of a concept. And so I've got to figure out a way to like, I still have a lot of thoughts on rap music that I think are funny and people would like, but I've got to make sure that I'm not approaching it like other white generic male looking male comics, and so that's the stuff I try to be really conscious of, is like, how do I stand out when I don't like stand out like in any other way except being tall? And so it's a constant challenge, but
that's just part of your path right now anyway. I mean, 2 years in, you don't know really what you want to do. It's all experimentation right now, right? But that's also it's pretty fun about it, right?
Yeah. And I'm always like, I write new stuff all the time. I try new stuff all the time. Kevin gets mad at me.
Remind me, how long has Kevin been doing it?
I don't know when he started, but I would say so.
He's like between 5 and 10 years.
No.
No? Okay.
Kevin Deanna? No. He's 2 years. Barely.
I don't know
over 2
why
years.
I thought he was longer than that.
I mean, his stage presence is really great. Like he just looks natural up there. He does a ton of work. He does a lot of shows at the Comedy Arena. He's hosting, he's opening, he's featuring. So he's out there a lot, like he's probably been doing it a long time.
Okay.
But we have very different philosophies when it comes to, should you try new stuff at a show?
Okay.
And mine is yes, because I always do. But I also don't go to very many open mics, just with my schedule, my kids and stuff like that. So I don't have chances to try stuff out. I go to like one open mic a month at most. And then now that we have regular Deadgood shows, Dallas Comedy Club, first Friday of every month.
That's the Melting Pot show,
Melting Pot shows. I don't know when this comes out, but whenever the first Friday of the next month that you're listening to this
is what we're at the end of January now, so this will be out at the beginning of February.
Okay.
Yeah.
So prepare for the March show, most likely, because our next one is February 2nd. So March, first Friday of March, 10 p.m. Dallas Comedy Club. But now that we have these regular shows, I'm like, hey, Kevin, I was thinking about trying this joke. I'll tell him in the green room, and he's like, okay, I guess.
And that's got to be so defeating.
Yeah, I don't know if you know. Do you know Kane?
Yes.
Yeah. So me and Kane and Kevin were backstage at the last show, and Kane was like, "Oh man, I got this new one I want to try," and he like pitches it to us, and we were like, dude, that's actually terrible. Like, you should definitely not do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I was going to try this one. And I think because of our initial reaction, he was especially not going to give me anything. So he was like, okay, yeah, I don't know about that. And Kev was like, hey guys, what if we just all did our sets that we know are good instead of trying new stuff? And we were like, nah, we're going to try to do stuff. And so, end of the day, Kevin was probably right, because Kane's joke pretty much bombed. My new joke pretty much bombed. And so Kevin was probably right. But then there's other stuff like the ones, that I at the Tyler show, the football whole story was brand new. And then I like changed the massage joke that I do. I changed the whole ending there. And then, I did a whole new joke on like veterinary bills and like stuff like that, where I was just like, of the 20 minutes I did, probably 5 minutes of it was new.
Okay.
Because I'm very like experimental when it comes to that, and I write a lot of stuff, and I'm very confident in my writing. Not as much in the performance of it or like, will it work? but I know that when I'm presenting it, it's a full-fledged joke, right? Like even when I go to a mic, like some people have the confidence to go up at a mic and be like, is this something? And then they just sort of start talking and then they hope they get to the ending.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't go up there unless I've written it fully in my head.
Yeah.
And I've gone over it multiple times and it sounds like a real fully fledged bit. Now it might totally bomb and that happens plenty of times, but at least I know that that joke bombed, not like I didn't finish the joke and now I have no idea if the concept is worth exploring or like, it's like, okay, well that joke didn't work. I don't know. To me, that's more satisfying to like, than just like exploring a concept on stage. But
yeah, I mean, that's kind of another really interesting aspect is that there's more than one way to skin a cat, you know, that it does what you just described as not liking works for so many people. And then what you described as liking doesn't work for them at all.
Yeah.
You know, and, again, that's why I love going to the open mics.
Yeah.
They're terrible. But I love it.
I love watching how other comedians write their bits. Like I love like even just do you have a physical notebook? Do you sit there and scribble things down all the time? Are you just like sitting there looking at something and writing? I don't know what they're doing. Like to me, that's like, I don't come up with bits while I'm watching other comedians do bits, right? Like, but I watch so many people that are watching someone tell jokes and then they're scribbling something. And I'm like, that doesn't work for me. Like I couldn't do that. And I don't keep a notepad. I just write like 1 or 2 words on my phone if I come up with a concept. And then I just tell it in my head until I get it, you know?
Yeah.
But watching other people, they write the whole thing longhand, right? Or they write the whole thing down on their phone, or they record the entire joke.
Yeah.
And I'll do that sometimes as well. But like, it's just really, I just love that like everybody's mind works totally differently. And that's why you get such different performances on stage because they wrote the joke totally differently. They think about it differently. Or, you know, some people have to have the exact wording down and they only tell the joke the exact same way every time.
Yeah.
Other people, you watch a joke and you've seen the joke 6 times and every time it had a little bit different wording or a little bit different, you know.
Yeah. I got to, I was fortunate. Ryan Perrio asked me to record a comedy album for him a couple years ago. And he did it over 4 shows, 2 nights, 2 shows each night.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting at the, you know, at the back, just watching his pretty much same set, mostly the same set, all 4 nights. And, but each set was very different, just very different. And he was just reading the crowd and adjusting. And, it was very, I told him, I was like, I would love someday to just release all 4 sets. Just totally, you know, don't edit things together, just 4 separate sets so people could see the variety, how this one joke was told almost 4 different ways just because the crowd was a little different.
I would love to see that. Yeah, I would love to see that.
It was very interesting.
Yeah, because like I know when Ralph did his special, it was like 6 shows, right? Over like 3 nights or something.
I don't know. I know he did at least 2 nights, but I don't know how many shows they did a night.
It was 4 or 6 shows in a row.
Wow.
And I would love to just show me like what the cuts were, or like what you know, did something happen and did someone sneeze and then you had to like that whole show is out, because you know that stuff is really interesting to me, especially because I do I haven't done it in a while, but like I've done a lot of like video work and like editing and like you know, behind the scene, you know, that kind of work, and that's really interesting to me of like what's cut. And like whenever you do release a video, and I'm sure with like Lawrence's thing, it's like, oh man, there's things you hated to cut, right?
You know,
like,
we're at the end of January, and so what is it today? Tuesday, and his special in real time right now. We're releasing his special on Saturday, and we're recording this on a Tuesday. And so you know, you guys are all in the future listening to this, but this past month or 2 has just been beyond frustrating in so many different levels. Yeah. Because you realize there are just so many things that are out of your control that are kind of screwing you up the whole time. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? And like, I'm always pretty much an optimist about these things, but a lot of the veteran comics, you know, when I was asking questions of why haven't you guys started releasing things around here?
Right.
You know, why aren't you just don't go to LA, don't go to New York? Why aren't you doing it here? Right. Because we always talk about we have the clubs, we have the things. And they would always tell me, the veterans would be like, you know, there's not an industry here. We don't have these things here. And, you know, so I'm Mr. Optimistic. I'm like, They just don't want it bad enough or
Right.
something. We'll, pull our bootstraps up and we'll do it. But they're right. It's like what I have learned has been so incredibly frustrating that it's like, we do not have these things here.
Yeah.
And you can do it, but it just makes it much, much harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you had that beautiful naivete, right? Like it's the same thing that like me and Kevin had with like producing shows or Niaz and Vinny with Cowabunga, where it's just like you don't know what you don't know, and that if you did know that, you wouldn't have started, right? That's like pretty
maybe,
maybe you're not, but I'm just saying like you certainly were probably more enthusiastic about it than when you would be if I said, hey, you're doing another special tomorrow. You'd be like, ugh, give me some time.
Well, I mean, I think what keeps me excited about it is just knowing that it's worth doing because I like Lawrence's stand-up, right? That and I know what I want to do long term with it, just like you guys know what you want to do long term with Deadgood, and so I think that's the motivation. But man, I'd be lying if I wasn't saying, there were several times where it's just like, why am I even doing this? Once we're done with this, I'm never going to do this again. This is absurd.
You just described all video projects. Exactly.
Yeah. And then just, did you do like the actual editing in your videos? Yeah. So you're one of the few people who know the frustrations that go into editing like 1 minute of something.
Hearing it over and over and over and over and
just trying to dial in like I just need to get this hue perfect,
Dude, worrying about the things that nobody cares about.
Well, if you don't do it, something will look weird.
Oh yeah,
but if you do it, no one will notice.
Yeah, exactly. The key is that no one will notice.
Exactly. Yeah. If you did a good job, no one gives a shit.
Yeah, exactly. No, my friends and I started an indoor soccer team now 10 years ago. And I did not play soccer, and I was so bad at it. But my friends wanted to play, and a lot of us we were really bad. We didn't win a game for like 2 years, but this like culture developed around the team of just like absurd comedy. Yeah, and we were called they're still around. They still play. I broke my arm. I don't know. Was that on? We weren't recording that.
No. Okay.
Anyway, I broke my arm 2 years ago and I quit. But I played for like 7 years doing something I'm awful at. But we were called the Billy Ray Jeters. Because we had a cardboard cutout in our apartment when me and my roommates lived together, and it was Derek Jeter, and we put Billy Ray Cyrus's face on it. Awesome. And it's still alive. We found it the other day. Actually, we put it in my friend's bed when he got back from his honeymoon. So he's still around. But anyway, this whole culture developed around this team of just like, we would just do bits. Like one guy would wear like a mullet wig sometimes for games, and I would make these really insane hype videos. Just like, if we had a game at like 11 p.m., I would make it like a really sexual, like Barry White, like late night Billy, like just really, really weird. And like, this is literally for like 6 people, like for like the people on the team and our wives, like nobody else cared. Yeah. But we had so much footage that I was like, I'm going to do a film about this. And so I made a 20-minute documentary about our team. Yeah. And it was so much work. And it was so much stuff of just like, this has to be right. But I learned so much about video editing, like because what is fun about it is you go, I have an idea that I want to do. I've seen this in a movie, or I want like, how do I do that? And you can Google it, and then it's like, yeah, you do this, and well, maybe you have to get this plug in, but like then you pull it off, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I look like a genius.
Like I kind of did it.
Yeah, yeah. And then then we rented out the Texas Theater, which you can do for like pretty affordable rate.
That's pretty incredible. I didn't know you could just rent it out.
Yeah, on like a Monday night, it was like $200, and we had a premiere. Like they put us on the marquee. We dressed in suits, and we played the 20-minute movie about our soccer team at the Texas Theater. And that's actually the 5-year anniversary is coming up. And I'm like, should we just rent out the theater again and do it again? But yeah, that was like one of those things where you can do when you don't have kids, because it's just so much time wasted. But like, it was really fun to have a goal and then learn how to do it on the way. Yeah. And that's what I think comedy has been a lot for us, and like producing comedy shows has been a lot for me and Kevin, where it's like, we wanted to do this. Yeah. We don't know how, but we're saying we have a show at this date. So how do we get to that point? All right, let's figure it out. Like, and then there's mistakes we make, but there's also like things we find along the way that wouldn't be found if we had the experience that told us not to try that thing. Yeah.
That is definitely something I've struggled with, which is you get these big visions and dreams. Yeah. And then you get the reality checks of your budget and your skill level. And that's fine because you can increase your skill level, you can increase your budget at some point. But for this project, you won't be able to do that. And so in the past, what I would have done, like with music, for instance, is I would have just gotten, very stubborn and thought like, we will do this. And then it will make the people you're working with very frustrated, and then you'll get frustrated, and then ultimately you won't do it, but now everyone's angry.
Right.
Right. And now what I've tried to really, probably over the past, definitely since I started this podcast, a little bit before, just trying to go, okay, we're going to accept that a certain amount of this project is just going to be fucked.
Yeah.
And you're just going to have to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
So inevitably, when these couple of things happen that throw you a curveball, you just need to go, all right, there's one.
Yeah.
So it must be a good project. It got screwed up there. So I guess we can't do that. That's fine. We'll do this, I guess.
Yeah.
And just not letting it weigh you down because, little things like the camera guys that I hired for the live taping portion, they were great. Like it was a guy I knew. He hired people that he knew, and he was great to work with. But a story I won't get into is like our setup time was, to no fault of our own, cut down from like what we thought was initially going to be like a 3-hour setup to like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And for sound, cameras, everything. So we're rushing. So there were things about the filming that I had to compromise with, and I didn't know it until the filming was done. And it's because I was so focused on doing my stuff, I didn't get to go do checks with them and be like, I like this, I don't like that, let's change this, let's change that. Because they would have made those changes, they just didn't have any feedback from me at all. Right. And so it's stuff you learn for the next project, but like when you're sitting there editing and you're like, God, I really wish I had this thing in my mind on one of these angles.
Right.
And I didn't get to because of the 2 or 3 other things that derailed us. And that's just how projects go.
Yeah.
And just accepting like nothing will, even if I had millions of dollars and a whole crew, when they made, like when Brad Pitt's on set of a Quentin Tarantino movie, like they're still making compromises, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You can't control everything.
Right.
And so that's been a harsh reality that I've struggled with coming to grips with, but I'm learning,
Yeah, that's every creative project. That's like the book I wrote. It's the same thing. Like what I thought it was going to be and what it became are so different. But now that was like 7 years ago, I go, yeah, that's like awesome that I pulled that off and that I did what I did, but at the time I was like, I had a bigger vision for this. Yeah. And I knew all the steps that caused me to not execute on the bigger vision. But now I don't remember that. And nobody else knew those things. Right. The people saw that I wrote a book and it's cool and whatever. And that's what you like always have to keep in mind as a creative is like, there's like this chart I saw one time and I think about it a lot where it's like, you start at the top and you're like the beginning of when you're starting like this creative project, you're like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be the greatest thing ever. Then you start getting into the work of it and then complications and you're going down and down and down. And then like at some point you go, this sucks. Like this is not worth it. I quit. I'm not even good at my job. I don't even know what I'm doing. And you're like, I'm just gonna walk away and like, we'll just, figure it out later. And then you go, okay, well, I think maybe if I just do this, I can, it starts going back up. Right. And you never get back to that peak of what you thought it was going to be, but you get to a point and you go, this is fine. Let me just get it out in the world. And then everyone else sees it and goes, oh my gosh, this album's great. This book's great. This stand-up's great. Because they didn't know what you wanted it to be. Yeah. They didn't see any of the work. They just see the finished product, which is if it's 70% of this grandiose vision you had, it's still better than what most people are putting out. Or, like creative work is really, really difficult because there's a lot of mental energy and just frustration because you wanted it to be this. And you have to it's always remember that nobody else knew that.
What will change it is when, Elon or somebody does the Neuralink and I can show you the picture of what's in my head.
Yeah. Well, then
because that's one of the most frustrating parts, right? Is like just trying to communicate the vision to the people you're working with. Yeah. It's so clear in there, but you just never have the right words and you can't be 100% hands-on to make it exactly what you need. Right.
Well, and that's what makes, you always think about like a movie director. You're like, what do they do? Right. Like if a director, they didn't even write it. They don't act in it. They don't move the camera. They don't, but they're the person that can translate the vision from the writing to the camera people, to the actors,
Yeah.
to the, and like that communication, the ability to communicate a vision, an artistic vision, is an incredibly important skill that's really hard to do properly. And that goes in a lot of different directions, creatively.
Well, just this one filming, I want to do more, but just this one, it was like the smallest taste of that. Because when we're frustrated with this limited time that we have to set up now, but you still got to keep your cool because you're kind of in charge of this. And you've got to make sure you're not flipping out, because then other people will get a really negative attitude about the whole thing. And now people are like kind of not caring because they're all frustrated. And so you're trying to keep this whole like, I don't want Lawrence to see me being frustrated, because I don't want him to think I'm angry about doing this project right now. Because the anger's not towards his stuff, it's towards the moment. And the camera guys who don't know me, who just showed up today, I don't want them to be like, who's this asshole? I don't give a shit about his work. And you're just trying to get it done and trying to just keep that fake happy face on, but don't let them know it's fake. Like,
that's why you see directors and people that always look like the most stressed people in the world.
It's like, how does somebody like Ron Howard do it?
Right, exactly.
How does he pull off these epic movies with, you've edited stuff. It's like just storage. It blows my mind. It blows my mind that movies get made knowing the amount of backups they must have to work with.
I can't
just in case a scene is lost, because now I'm just thinking like, okay, when this is done, I got to get it off this SD card. I got to get a backup on the hard drive so that I want to mess with it later just in case something happens, because stuff can just stop working for no reason,
and formatting and like 90, like I would say, no joke, like just in that stupid little documentary I made, 40% of the time was just like storage, right? Like clearing storage off my computer using an external hard drive. 20% of the time was figuring out how to render it properly to get it on a Blu-ray disc. Buying a Blu-ray burner, which still existed at the time, from oh my gosh, what's the like Best Buy not knockoff, but like competitor,
like Fry's Electronics or something.
The original Fry's, or not original Fry's, but the Fry's that was over on Northwest Highway that had like the
huge
cows.
one.
It was like the biggest place in the world. And they had like Longhorns. And stuff. It was really weird.
Over off Northwest Highway near 635.
I used to live in the neighborhood right next to that. And I think I got like a Blu-ray burner, and I burned a bunch of Blu-rays, but I had to have a Blu-ray to play it at the theater. Then I burned like some for people to have. And then I think I returned it. Like I didn't take the tags off or anything, because I was like, I don't want to spend $80 on this. But anyway, like all of that is like such a frustrating piece of doing stuff like that. You're like, why am I dealing with freaking storage? I don't get it. My friends were like, hey, like, they were like, for the 5-year anniversary of our documentary, you should make another one. And I was like, yeah, in 2 weeks. We were talking about this yesterday. And I was like, I'm going to be honest with you, that computer committed seppuku. Like, that computer died. Like, the project, it got the last Blu-ray burned, and then it just blew up and caught on fire. Like, so much footage. And like,
I was joking about it online, but I really think I'm going to start an in-person bitch and gripe session for anybody that produces anything in DFW. I don't care what it is, a show, an open mic, you're doing video, audio, anything you want, just so other people can hear these struggles. And then it's like, maybe you get an answer from somebody, but really it's just about just getting it out of your system. And just being around,
a safe space.
Just a little Producers Anonymous or whatever.
No talent is allowed, because then they'll feel bad they did that to you.
Right. But just somebody to vent about, like, God, it's because it made me think about we have a couple pretty standard people in the scene who constantly have like an open mic or something going on, like and they'll move it from like a bar to a bar, like they try to keep it going. And I'm just thinking, between dealing with the bars, the flaky comics that come to open mics and all this stuff, it's like, how do they retain the passion to keep hosting these things when they probably take so much shit that I don't even know about?
I have full respect for anybody who runs open mics and who finds places to do them and then consistently does it, because it's like, man, like producing shows, I mean, it has, I'm not gonna lie and be like, it's been the most stressful thing ever, but like, there's some stress, but it's like, hey, we're dealing with like 3 comics or 3 or 4. The people we're booking are much more experienced, typically reliable. Like, we know they're going to show up, right? And then, but like an open mic, you're telling a bar like, yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of people here.
Yeah.
And then you might not.
Yeah. Like Gretchen Young, for instance, hosting her open mic down at the Statler, the Bourbon and Banner or whatever. And, it's like, yeah, she had to go down to the Statler and like talk to somebody and deal with them and be like, I'm going to bring a bunch of comics in here.
Dude.
And they rarely have money.
I know. Yeah, the Statler.
Right? But somehow she convinced them. And then she's got to convince the comics, like, show up, do your set, maybe buy a drink. That way we can stay doing this set,
Yeah.
And that's just one example of someone in the scene who's, and I was thinking about her, how she's done it at multiple bars since I've kind of been doing this podcast. It's like the amount of stuff that she could probably tell you that would make you feel better about your project going off the rails.
Yeah.
And be like, it's not that bad. It just comes with the territory, I guess.
Yeah, I know. It is wild. And, like the approaching people, like I have so much respect for Niaz. Like,
dude.
I think it was his second ever show. It was at McNeil's, and that was my second ever show. When you're new in a scene or you're new in anything, you think everybody else has been doing it forever. Mm-hmm. So when he asked me to be on the show, I was like, cool, like this experienced guy, like he asked me to be on the show. This is cool.
I'm noticing a pattern with you. You think everyone's got like 10 years on you. Yeah,
that's true though. I really do. So I get there and I'm talking to him and it like becomes very clear, like, no, like he's as new as me. And this is like, he just approached McNeil's and they were like, sure. Mm-hmm. And he was like, cool. Now I figured I'd do a comedy show. And it was great. It was a big crowd, but like, the one I was at, he booked a bunch of guys that were like mostly at my level of like open micers, like brand new. Mm-hmm. And then he had like Arun and like David J. Diaz and like people who were really good at the end of like 7 or 8 or 9 like open micers. And the quality was variable. Very variable. I'll say that. But I just was like really impressed. And that like was kind of an inspiring thing to me. And I didn't know it at the time, but like later when Kevin and I started doing the Deadgood stuff was like, because I learned from Niaz that like, yeah, if you just sort of ask and you just can figure it out, right? Like you can people are willing to let you figure it out. And maybe that's unique to Dallas with stuff, but I think it's a cool like entrepreneurial, like if you have an entrepreneurial spirit in this kind of thing, then you can be successful. And like if you're going to put in the work, people are like, yeah, put in the work.
Yeah. You just have to think of it as, how can I let them know that I'm not going to inconvenience them and that they'll probably benefit from it somehow?
Exactly.
And if you can just go at it from that mindset, it gets easier. And just realize, I mean, the biggest thing I think I've realized throughout life, nothing to do with this podcast or comedy or anything, just if you just do only what is expected, don't even worry about going above and beyond. Just only do what's expected. And you're going to be a really great, like you're going to be the person who gets stuff done.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, that person's a go-getter.
Yeah.
Because everyone is just so lazy.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it as like a generational thing.
No.
I just mean genuinely, like if you're at a job, there's usually a couple people that do it exactly as they should. And then there's a lot of people that kind of slack off.
Yeah.
And so all you got to do is like, just hit your marks, and you're going to be somebody where they're like, man, you can really rely on Scott. He nails it.
Right.
And before you know it, you're going to be excelling. And it's like, so if you just put a tiny bit of effort on top of that, not much, now you're really cooking, you know, and you're starting to learn, to your point, it's like, if you just try to go do the thing, if you just go ask them, like, what would it take for me to do this? They'll be very clear. This is what I want. This is what I don't want. And you go, oh, yeah, I think I can do that. Mm-hmm. And doors just kind of start opening, and then because it's a creative project, they'll slam shut again. But, like your graph earlier, it's like, just start. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And it's also, that's exactly right. And the ability not just to meet expectations, but the willingness to take on things that people aren't willing to take on is a big thing in life, business, whatever. But like, when you're talking about comedy, like you typically, if you've, this isn't the way like Deadgood has done our shows, but like with Niaz in Cowabunga, it's like a bar has probably been like, we've thought about doing that. Yeah. But I mean, we don't know anybody in comedy, or we don't know how to do this, or we don't know X, Y, and Z. And you go, I can do that. And they, well, we don't have a sound system. And you go, I'll figure it out. Even if you don't have any experience in it. Like, even if you don't, you just go, yeah, I'll do it. It's just like with, when Sylvia was like, do you have 7 minutes? I was like, I will.
Yeah, right.
And it's like that gets you a long way in life. If you go, I'll figure that out. Yes, let me do it.
And you live in the best time in the history of mankind to be able to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
The amount of information on the internet, that you can just, I don't know how to do this thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to just type in whatever bullshit thing, and you're going to have, 60, 70 versions of how other people did that, and you're just going to pick the one that works for you.
Exactly.
I mean, you can learn so much now on the fly.
We really don't have any excuse, unless something is just like so complicated, but like...
Yeah, unless you need like a legitimate education and degree to teach. If you're talking about engineering, no, I don't want you to learn it on YouTube, but...
Right.
But, editing a video, it's like you can learn how much time you got.
Yeah.
You can learn it all. The pros of the pros have free lessons out there, It's pretty incredible. So, I don't know. I know you guys are in the same lane. That's why I like talking to you guys and the Cowabunga guys, because there's just this excitement about, we have this scene that has a lot of opportunity and a lot of good talent in it. And we have all these clubs, we have all these spaces to do big things. And y'all, both of these production companies I like a lot. And y'all have your two separate lanes, but you have the same goal in mind.
Right.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, and it's not like there's no like competition or like, oh, am I encroaching on this or that? It's like, hey, like they're doing good, we're doing good. Like if we want to work together at some point, great. If we don't, great. Like there's no like, man, I hope they don't get that talented person. It's like if that person's on their show, then they'd be like you guys talked about with like them being more prepared, like to do 20 minutes at a certain time, or like that's just great. Like someone does a Cowabunga show and 10 people at the Fillmore pub saw them for the first time and they're like, wow. And then that person is on one of our shows later and they're like, oh, that's that guy I really liked, or that's that girl I really liked. You guys want to go to the show? It's like, it's all, helps each other. Like everybody, the more people see the comedians in our scene, the more they're going to want to go see them again.
Yeah. And all the comics here, I mean, you need as many reps as you can get, right?
Right.
I think that's one of the defining setbacks that we potentially have here compared to, say, like an East Coast comedy scene is, there are, there's areas where you can just hop mic to mic to mic to mic to mic in these other scenes.
Yeah.
And we got to build some of that here to where the volume of shows, the volume of work you can get in a week so that you can work on it, right? If you, like you said, if your schedule doesn't allow you to go wait for 4 hours to hit an open mic, but you can get on a couple shows, it's like, okay, now you can still work on these things. I think that's one of the areas we have for improvements. We have a lot of clubs, we have a lot of shows, but it still feels like we need more.
Well, and I think
we need more.
I think also it's, geographically we're just so spread out here. So it's like, I know a lot of comics do this, but it just doesn't work for me. But it's like they'll go to the mic in McKinney and then they were like, yeah, I'm going to go over to Louisville or I'm going to go, and I'm like, no, like this is the one thing I did tonight. And it was a big deal to get here.
Yeah.
I can't drive now 35 miles to go wait another couple hours. It's like, you mentioned, other cities that are maybe more walkable or more just like concentrated. So like New York, you could maybe just go boom, 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 walk to, 3 or 4 mics in a night. And that's just what you can do. And here, they're spread out so far. So even if there are a couple in DFW that could be 30 miles apart, it's like, not a lot of people can pull that off. And
I've noticed there's still a great separation, not with the comics, but just Dallas and Fort Worth, right? Like it's harder for Dallas comics to hit the Fort Worth mics. It's harder for Fort Worth comics to hit Dallas mics.
Well, I'm not going to Fort Worth.
Exactly.
Are you kidding me?
No, is that how it is?
There was a time, speaking of the Skira Icelandic water.
Yeah.
We're sponsored by
Not a sponsor.
Skira.
Please give me money.
Skira. There was a time that living in Dallas, had been to Reykjavik in Iceland more times than I'd been to Fort Worth. And I'd been living in Dallas for 5 years.
Fort Worth's all right, man. I don't know much about it, but
yeah, again, you don't know much about it. It's not that far, but it's so far that you don't know much about it.
Oh, it's so far. Well, I only go for comedy shows and the very occasional concert, and then I run the marathon at the end of February. Those are the things. That's what I
Do
know.
you run the marathon just to get to Fort Worth?
Yeah,
and then
right.
you stop and you're like, I'm not even here yet. I'm still
For the Fort
6
Worth
more miles.
The marathon was eye-opening about Fort Worth though, because I a couple years ago I decided I wanted to do the Dallas and the Fort Worth marathon for as long as I can do it, as many years as I can keep doing it. And the Dallas marathon, Dallas, we're a type of person here, right? Like it's sponsored by BMW, and
Of course, yeah.
It's directly in front of City Hall, and there's like DJs, and there's confetti cannons and fireworks and smoke, or not smoke, but fog, right? And it's when you're crossing the line, it's like, are you ready? It's like, bah, 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 and this whole production, right? And that's a Dallas attitude of flashy, showy for Dallas, right? And then Fort Worth, they got a PA system. It's playing some music. It's probably playing like Eye of the Tiger or something, and something very appropriate. And it's like we get up to the start line, and it's like, I don't know if it was the mayor or somebody there, but it was somebody like that, who
Fired a 6-shooter.
No, I wish. No, they like kind of turned the volume down a little bit, and they're like, we really thank you guys for coming out here.
Surprise.
No, I wish. And they were like, we really appreciate you guys coming out for this marathon. I think it's going to be a good run. We're going to let the group in front of you get down a little bit before we let you go, and then you guys will set off. And it's like, and then it got down, to our time, and they're like, all right, and 3, 2, 1, here we go.
Yeah.
And it was just
the timed you on like an analog.
Yeah, it was just very relaxed, more. It felt a little more small town, even though it's a big city, and it was just interesting. I like them both. It's just
Fort Worth's a great place to visit.
Different.
Like I've gone on there on vacation, but like I'm not just going there on a normal day. Are you kidding? Like I went to the Black Keys show at Dickies on like a Thursday evening, and I was like, I'm never doing that again. Like,
really?
It was just like so
not
far.
even for the Black Keys.
I mean, I probably would do it again.
Yeah, come on.
But no, it was like. It was just like
it is
like
far.
2 in the afternoon.
when I do come back from anything over there, the drive back down 30 all the way to Dallas, I'm like, here we go.
Passing through Arlington.
And you're just going through all these areas where the cops are kind of dicks.
Oh yeah.
So you can't even really just drive fast home. You got to do the speed limit. I'm not going to get pulled over in Arlington, Irving, or Grand Prairie. It's like all these opportunities, and but I do have a good time when I go. I'm
not doing it. Like
we need just like a really great train or something that just quickly goes there. Not like the TRE, but like I don't know, like something that just
that sounds practical. Do other cities?
Yeah.
In all of the entire
we're not going to go.
do
We're not
that?
going to go down that. We're not going to go down that.
Is that something
path.
that every other city in the world would do?
Yeah, I know. We have the Dart. It's going well.
The World Cup is the final is going to be at Cowboy Stadium.
Oh wow!
The 2026 World Cup. And my favorite thing to think about is that Europeans are going to fly over here. They're going to spend their life savings. They're going to fly over here to the World Cup in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to the game is going to be at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. They're going to fly to the Dallas Fort Worth Airport.
Yep.
They're going to get hotels in Dallas, and then they're going to be like, we're 35 miles from the stadium. How?
Yeah.
We can't rent a car. We don't know how to the Uber is $200 because there's 400,000 people here.
It's no big deal. We'll just take the train over to the stadium.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
We'll just take the train. Because surely the stadium with 110,000 seats is going to have a public transport. So we'll just take the train.
The stadium for one of the largest, most wealthy franchises.
Yeah. And with the World Cup final is the biggest event in the world. I'm sure there's just a train. Oh, wait, no, we just have to Uber. And now we have no money left. Like my friends and I have been talking about this for a while because it was rumored for a while. And like, that is so funny.
Yeah.
That they just, as one of my friends says a lot, the European mind can't comprehend this.
Or
like they don't
worse,
know what this is like.
Or worse, you fly in, you go, oh, it's actually in, Arlington or whatever. I'll get a hotel in Arlington.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll just go out at night and like see the sights and stuff. And you're like, no, it's not near any of the sites.
Right. Yeah. We'll just go to the clubs. We'll I'm sure the fan zone will be fun. Wait, that's probably in downtown Dallas. They will not be able to understand that it is not in Dallas.
Have you seen that video of that guy talking about how people shit on Americans because we'll say like, oh, you live here in Britain, like, oh, is that close to London? And they're like, no, it's like 2 hours away. And then some guy gets on there and he's like, have you fucking seen Texas?
Yeah.
He's like, people in Texas just commute to work like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, a 2-hour drive for a Texan is absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
And he starts breaking down the maps of how many areas are outside of 2 hours in Texas.
Yeah.
And how, like, in Europe, it's like 2 hours. It's like, boom, another
3
country.
countries,
Yeah. And he's like, it's a different level, man. He's like, so when they ask, is 2 hours away near to Dallas, near to London, is like, it's near to London.
Yeah, of course.
They're thinking like, we'll drive in for the day and drive back.
Yeah. Well, no, like the thing that fascinates me about Europe and England specifically is I'm a huge like soccer fan and a huge just like, look at me. Of course I'm British. But is like, so like Liverpool, they have a very unique accent, the Scouse accent, very hard to understand. Doesn't sound like anything else. Like the Beatles, like that's how they speak. If and then Manchester has a totally different accent. Doesn't sound the same at all. And Manchester and Liverpool are closer together than Frisco and Dallas. And then another 19 miles east is Sheffield, which they consider like an isolated town.
Mm-hmm.
And their accent is so different. They don't even use they use different sort of grammar forms. And these cities are literally the difference between like Dallas, Frisco, and like not even Gainesville, like Sanger or something, right? And if you told me that the people in Frisco had a completely different accent than people in Dallas, like that would be insane. But these towns are so close together, but they were so isolated for centuries. They all sound different, and they just have a totally different comprehension of like what far away is and like what, like.
And it dawns on you how old Europe is. That it's they probably had castles, and if you came over, it meant that you were fighting.
Yeah.
And they just kept to themselves. You know?
They couldn't, like 19 miles, we're like, hardy hard, 19 miles is like, that would take you 4 days. Of course they sounded different when they got over there. You had to go through some hills and probably like fight some people, but it's just so funny. Like, and I am obsessed with thinking about like what people are going to think when they get here.
I bet they love it though. I bet
they'll have a good time.
I bet it's so
fascinated.
But I bet they'll come here and they'll love shitting on the American way, and so they'll have a great time.
So many videos.
We ate so many cheeseburgers while we were Ubering everywhere, and they'll talk shit about our whole setup, and then but they'll leave back. They'll go home and they'll be like, I don't know. It actually was pretty fun.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
It was pretty badass.
Yeah. When I went to a Liverpool game and I was talking to a guy, a Liverpoolian guy, and he was saying he came over and went to a Dallas Cowboys game one time, and like the weirdest thing the thing that was weird to him was that everyone has their IDs on them at all times.
Like your driver's license?
Yeah.
That was weird to him?
He was like, like you have to have your identity. Like he thought that was so strange. And I was like, of all the things, you're in this stadium that looks like the Death Star. People are paying $100 for parking. Yeah. And the one thing that stood out to you was that like people had to have their IDs. So he had to like carry his passport with him all the time. Yeah. But I don't know. I thought that was the strangest.
I thought that was like pretty universal in like modern cities though.
Apparently not. And I guess because their drinking age is 18. So it's just kind of like, I mean, like if you don't look 18, you're not getting a beer. Right? Yeah. Like it's not that hard to look 18.
Yeah.
And then I mean, a lot of them don't drive. So they don't need. But anyway, I just thought that was the weirdest take. So who knows?
Yeah. Because I mean, the stadium itself is so bizarre. It's, we're here in Texas and it's a football stadium, but then like if you go there and do the tour, they show you all the like huge works of art they wanted to make sure they put in there.
Gene Jones,
and it's like
her project.
Yeah. And then, it's just what? And it's just so, it's unique to Texas, right? Texas is strange in its own compared to America.
So over the top.
Yeah, and then I'm sure you know about the European fascination with the TV show Dallas, right?
Oh, dude! I mean, everywhere I've ever been, like, you know Dallas, and I'm like, I mean, like, I now live like 5 minutes from South Fork Ranch.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So, how many of them are going to come here for that and be like, we got to drive out to South Fork?
Yeah, and then it's not even close to Dallas.
Oh, and then they get over there and they're like, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like a house
farm,
and like a.
No, I was in
I
was in Big Bend a couple years ago, and we were in the gas station, and these European people. One guy put on a hat. These old European people, and he goes, "A J.R. Ewing," and I start laughing, and he was like, "Yeah," and I was the only one who got what he was saying, and everyone else was really confused. And I was like, "He's talking about Dallas, like like, of course, Europeans are upset," and he was from Belgium. And like they were having the time of their lives and that was so funny about Big Bend is like Big Bend is like Texas from movies.
Right.
But it's so far away from us.
Yeah. Literally the furthest you can get from every other part of Texas.
Yeah. And so they had come all the way over. Like they were Belgian and Dutch tourists, and they were getting the Texas experience, and they were having the time of their lives. But it was just, I'm like, and then he goes, when I come back, where should I go to Dallas or Houston or Austin or San Antonio? And I was like, you just shouldn't. I was like, if you're going to travel all the way across, like, you got the Texas thing, like, maybe go to Austin if you want. But I was like, just, I don't know, if you're going to fly that far, like, but like, I can't really promise you're going to have a good time.
But that's the weird part about Texas. And even in, the United States, like, people don't understand. It's like when we went to Big Bend, we drove, and I think I think we drove 13 hours, and that got us to Marfa, which was like, what is that, like an hour and a half away from Big Bend still?
From the park, right.
And so you're like, God.
Dude, and once you cross the line into the park, then you have like 3 hours of driving in the park to different places. It's just a vast, like, I love it, but it's like, it's just so big and so vast. And I've been 3 times, and I've only seen probably 5% of it. If I'm honest, like, there's a whole park that I haven't even been to because it's so far away. I'd love to, but like, I don't have 3 weeks. It took 2 days to get there.
When we went, I had at the time I had a huge telescope. It was like a really nice, very like professional setup.
Oh wow!
And out there, it's like the darkest skies you can get in the country. And so that part was just really...
Did you go to the McDonald Observatory?
No, I can't remember why we didn't go. We did not go to that. But
dude, it's so cool.
Yeah, and no, we got a cabin in... pretty sure we were in Terlingua. I'm trying to remember now. And, so we would just drive into the park each day.
Yeah, that's the closest place to stay.
And then, but like at nighttime, our cabin, it's like they were all very mindful. The porch lights were like red lights and dim and everything. And so you could just grill up some food. And we went in winter, so it's like extra cold. The air's extra clear. Yeah, it was awesome, man. And so you just forget how much light pollution affects you all the time. Dude, even when you're out in small towns now, there's just so much glowing from the neighboring cities that you just don't see what everybody used to see.
Yeah, the McDonald Observatory is really cool. They do a program where they'll they tell you like, do not look at your phone because it'll reset your eyes for an hour or for 20 minutes. Your eyes will be totally like. So don't look at your phone. Don't look at anything. There's just little lights on the ground, but it's totally dark. And you sit in the round outside, and the guy has a laser pointer, and he's like showing you all these things, and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is what people saw 100 years ago. For all of human existence, they were seeing basically what we have to go all the way out there to see. And they're naming all the this is called this, and it's like, man, like that is so interesting to think about, like. Every night, the like Native Americans are laying on the plains and like looking at these stars, and that's kind of their fun. Like, they didn't really have TV. Like, this is like what people did for a long time, and it's just really, really cool. But you look out here, and like I was trying to show my son stars the other day in our neighborhood, and like we live by Oak Point Nature Preserve, so it's not like middle of Dallas kind of thing, but it's still like we can't see anything.
No, I mean I live in East Dallas, and when I had that telescope, you could see a handful of things. So you could see a couple of the planets really well. You could see a couple of like nebulas, like the Orion Nebula, you could see really well. But it had to be big things. But it was still surprising with this much light pollution that you could see those things, right? And I feel like people have such a disconnect from that stuff, and we would all benefit by grasping that enormity. Yeah. So, when you look at the Orion Nebula through a telescope, since it's not the Hubble or the James Webb's telescope, it's not, it doesn't have all these beautiful colors because they're looking at it in all these different different measurements. But so when you're looking at it and it's basically black and white, it's like, it doesn't seem impressive. Right. But then when you rattle off the stats, like I would tell my wife, that's, 8 light years across, and it looks that small, and you're explaining the distances and all that. And then all of a sudden she's like, let me look again. And, she's checking it out, and she's like, God, that's really cool, And we were able to see, what was it? We were able to see Uranus. But no, we were able to see Uranus through our telescope in Dallas. And it's just a speck of blue where we're looking, Oh, wow. But still, that little blurry blue. You're like, God, that's a planet that's
so
far away. And I can actually look at it. And there's just something wild when you know, yeah, I can see all these pictures, I can see all these things, but like I just confirmed myself that it's there.
Yeah.
And that's wild. And knowing, like you said, that people would just lay on their backs and look at all those things. More than just that, you know,
Right.
Every night. And then you contemplate like, yeah, that's what it all is, man. It's like Joe Rogan used to have that great bit of how stupid it is to look at the Grand Canyon because you can look up anytime you want, and that goes on for we don't know.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. Like everywhere around you goes on for eternity, no matter which direction you look, and we're just staring at a ditch. You know, and it's like, yeah, it's simplified, but yeah. So it's like I would love to see cities move towards light pollution projects to reduce. I mean, would it be crazy to have all of our like the lights you use for safety, like street lights and things? Would it be crazy to make those red light that made it easier on your eyes than the
yeah.
I mean, it'd be a little creepy. You'd adjust.
Yeah,
you know,
you would get used to
you'd be
it.
fine.
Yeah.
And you know, being more conscious of those types of things, how much would it help take that orange glow off of every city to where at least if you went out to some of these farm towns outside of DFW, you know, you could have a real experience like that. You know, and then how many problems could you maybe solve if people kind of checked themselves of like, hey, there's a lot out there. We're a pretty small part of it, and we could lose it all really fast if, you know, you just had a comet impact or something.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I'm big on like being outdoors, and that's why we, you know, live next to Oak Point, and like, you know, it's still in the middle of the city, but it is pretty nice to be able to just go out there and just be out in the woods and like be out in nature and see animals and see like, it's not just like this whole world on your phone and on the computer and in your house. And, you know, it's like that stuff is so important for your just brain, right? To breathe the air and to just, you know, I experience it like with animals and stuff is like really important. Like just, I don't know, especially having a kid and you know, trying to make sure your kid isn't obsessed with like television and stuff and being like, hey, like, let's go do this. Like, this is a leaf, right? Like, this is an acorn. This becomes a tree. Like, that stuff is so fun to teach a kid because they're like, what?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah. Like,
how old is your kid?
He turns 4 February 25th. So I think it's the same age as your kid.
Yeah, my son is beginning of February. He turns 4. So same age. Yeah, so he's going through that same like wonderment, you know, where everything. I mean, literally, when we walk, he'll just grab a leaf, a leaf, and you realize it's like, oh my God, this is the moment where I'm supposed to be like making him better.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's like all that technology that I love, right? It's a tool.
Right.
But I just want him so bad to have a respect for like the natural process of things as well as the scientific process of things and the blend that it all has. Because I do feel like if we invested as much money and time as we could into studying those aspects of because we still don't know. I mean, they're still arguing about age of universe right now.
Right.
You know, every couple of years, there's new research that comes out. They just found out there's there's galaxies that are in certain depths of the universe when they look that are aged and more mature than what they should be for what we think that age is. Right. So everything's always a moving. You know, we still haven't figured it out, right?
Right.
We're gonna be looked upon in this generation the same way we look on. Like you remember how when they were learning what the atom was. You know, there were like 3 real, like, we think it's this. Well, actually, we think it's that. Oh, okay, no, now we're pretty sure it's this. And that's what we're doing, right? So we're just another step of like, we got it figured out. It's this. And then another 50 years from now, they're going to go, they had no fucking clue what it was.
Yeah.
There's this whole other thing. So I feel like we should be dumping all these resources into just constantly studying that. Because whether you're religious, scientific, whatever, we don't know why any of this stuff is here.
Yeah, there's a huge
no answer.
There's a huge knowledge gap.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think
just looking at the stars at night would motivate people to go, we got to figure more out about this. We got to learn about this.
Yeah. I think just being connected to nature, being connected to things outside of the screens and stuff is really important.
Yeah.
And just unplugging, like that's and you know, every kid when they get to watch TV, they're like, this is the greatest thing of all time. And I want to dedicate my life to this. And it's like so hard to like pull that away and be like really strict about it. But like, I think it's super, super, super important. And it helps me too. There's a great, it's a podcast, it's a book. It's just a concept really called 1,000 Hours Outside. Do you know about this?
No.
And so basically this lady, she's dedicated to her and her kids will spend 1,000 hours outside every year, which is, about 2.5 hours a day.
Okay.
Which is like a commitment. You can't just accidentally do that. And it's become this movement and people are really, really into it. We got into it for 2 weeks last year.
So do you try to go 2.5 consecutive hours, or are you breaking up your day?
During the day, you just tally up as many hours as you can outside. And you have to be we're going outside. And you got to be cool with all kinds of weather and, all this stuff. We tried it. Honestly, it's almost impossible to do with Texas summers because you can't just have a kid outside in the 107 degrees unless they're in water, right?
Or the couple weeks we just had where it's just freezing cold weather.
But see, I'm a big cold weather guy, so I'm you can bundle up. We were outside for hours. Me and my son, we had a lot of fun. But summers, to me at least, I just can't. I hate it. So I shouldn't live here. That's another discussion. But anyway, the whole concept is all of the benefits of being outside are so easily quantifiable, scientifically, if you're just healthier if you're outside more. And obviously 1,000 hours is a very lofty goal. And what she says is you don't have to get 1,000. If you tried for 1,000, you got 500. You had a great year. And your kid was probably better, better for
and there's going to be days where you're out there for 4 or 5 hours.
Right, exactly. There's going to be beautiful days where you're at the park and then you're doing this, then you're out in the backyard, and you make up for it, and you just have, if you just make it as a priority, it's really beneficial to.
Well, how much of just being exposed to the sun, how much vitamin D deficiency you would have just because, I was thinking about that. I was like, man, when it's springtime and I'm not worried about getting, sunburned and stuff yet, it's I really do need to focus on wearing shorts and short sleeves, because when you go, I was thinking about when you go out in shoes, pants, long sleeve shirt, hat, it's you have only your face and your hands receiving sunlight. Right. And that's probably not enough to generate what you need for vitamin D, right? Yeah. And so I was oh yeah, I'm going to have to really make an effort to go I need the sun to hit me a little bit. Get on the skin a little bit.
See, I feel
here.
You probably get a good tan,
I do, but I also don't want to be just leathery when I'm old. So, it's this balance of don't get burned and just tanned all the time. Because even if you tan easily, you're still just getting burned. I just burn better than you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just super pale. So
my son is pale and redhead. So I'm learning the ways.
Yeah. Oh, my son is even more pale than me. We're oh my gosh, he makes me look tan. But that's why I like going to Iceland, because I'm no one's judging me here. I just look normal here. This guy, he's one of us.
Yeah.
Same skin tone.
Yeah, man, you're probably gonna end up leaving us someday then, huh?
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To go to Iceland?
Oh, anywhere.
Anywhere else? Oh, okay.
Anywhere that's not so hot. No, yeah, I would love to go to Iceland, but that's not practical. But no, our families are here. If our families weren't here though, we would be gone so fast.
Yeah. You will eventually. They'll die.
Oh my gosh.
Everyone does. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal.
Honestly, we've thought about. We've been okay, yeah, maybe when our kids graduate, we'll retire somewhere cool. And they were no, but then what if our kids want to hang around here? Then it's no, we got to have a plan. We got to say this is the year we're going to do this. We're going to move to wherever, the mountains, or just get at it.
You got to make the plan, because so many people don't. So many people just talk, and then before you know it, they're 80 and they never did it.
Right. I was talking to a younger friend of mine. She and her husband are 23, and they were yeah, we're gonna move to Colorado, and they knew where they wanted to move, and they were but then we decided we're gonna go ahead and buy a house here for a couple of years, blah blah blah. And I was I was
getting locked in.
I know. I was look, I'll just tell you this: you can do that, but you need to set a date of when you're moving to Colorado, because you're not going to if you're just eventually we're going to do it. I was just and it's kind of,
it's just like that 7 minutes of comedy.
That's exactly right. We brought
just
it all
like
the way
that
back.
7 minutes of comedy.
You got there before me. We brought it all the way back. But just if you have a thing, you work to that thing, and that's It inspires greatness.
Yeah. We brought it full circle. That's where we're going to stop
finally did.
Dude, thanks for coming on the show. I had obviously I love the Deadgood shows, and those are ones I have access to the most, but man, I'm glad you were out in Tyler at the time that just before you were coming on the show, so it motivated me to go out there. Because it was on the list, because Tyler Elliott, who's from there, and I believe Brandon Davidson is from there as well.
Yeah, I think
they're kind of like, they kind of cheer on the comedy scene in that area to people who don't know about it. But, Tyler had been chirping in my ear about it, and then when I saw you doing a show, I was like, I gotta go. And it did, man. Like the whole idea of comedy in Tyler, it just kind of lit a fire in me of like, oh man, there's another group of people doing it, and they're psyched about it the same way like you guys are with Deadgood, and I like to think I am with this podcast and stuff, and it was a fun experience.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being a maniac and driving 4 hours total for.
Yeah, no, especially after we talked about Europeans and how they're going to hate driving. And then in the article I wrote, I was talking about how people should make like day trips to Tyler for the comedy club, and like, make it a thing where you go out there, experience Tyler, watch a show, stay the night, go back the next day kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, never drive to Fort Worth anymore.
I know. It honestly, to me, is like less of a beating to drive to Tyler, even though it's like an hour and 45 minutes.
It was a nice drive, man. It was a nice drive. But anyway, it's Scott Bedgood, Deadgood comedy shows. And so when this comes out, you said the show's going to be at the beginning of March. It's probably the closest one.
Yeah. We have shows at Dallas Comedy Club on the first Friday of each month, 10 p.m. You can get tickets on Dallas Comedy Club. But follow me at Scott Bedgood on Instagram, and then at Deadgood Productions on Instagram as well.
Did y'all move everything to DCC? Weren't y'all doing...
we're not like exclusive.
But did y'all have another show y'all were doing somewhere else? I can't remember. I know you were working at the Comedy Arena, but I thought you had a separate show for some reason. Maybe I'm getting you mixed up.
Yeah, I think you're getting... We have some things in the works.
Okay.
And we may have had some conversations about
maybe
stuff.
It was something like that.
But yeah, just follow along there and we'll make any announcements. But those are the shows that we have on the schedule is DCC right now. But we do, we work, wherever anybody will have us. So yeah, we're not... no one's locked us. Yeah. It's an open relationship.
They're available for hire.
Yeah. We're in an open relationship, if you know.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. The I'm a Fan of podcast, music, comedy, and more.